Hey everyone, welcome back to Dark Sleep Radio. Today I'm sharing another real-life encounter with something beyond our everyday world. But first, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. Last October, I was deer hunting in a remote area of northern Utah's Mule Deer Tops Plateau. Typically I hunt solo, but this time my cousin Tyler was supposed to join me. At the last minute, he couldn't make it due to his kids' school commitments, so I went alone, nothing unusual for me. The weather was perfect, cold mornings, clear skies, no fresh snow. I camped just off a barely visible Forest Service logging access trail, a few miles past the road gates. Friday evening, I hiked in, set up my tent, and scanned the ridge before sunset. That night was uneventful, so I turned in early. Up before 5 the next morning, I had coffee and was hiking northeast by first light. The landscape was a beautiful mix of rocky slopes, pine stands, and small clearings. Around 7:30, after crossing a frozen creek and following a narrow game trail up a ridge, something caught my eye. About a quarter mile in, I spotted something unusual off to my left, around 50 yards down the slope. It wasn't sunlight on snow or ice, but a constant, bright reflection like metal. Initially, I thought it might be abandoned trash, maybe a hubcap or broken cooler. As I got closer, I realized this was no ordinary object. A perfect silver sphere, about 3 feet in diameter, was half buried at the base of a small rock outcrop. Its surface was smooth like brushed aluminum, with no seams, dents, or scratches. What struck me most was the ground around it, completely undisturbed. No drag marks, no broken branches, no footprints. Not mine, not anyone else's. Frost covered nearby leaves and grass, but not the sphere. When I touched it, it felt warm, warmer than the surrounding air, but not hot. I crouched down, searching for any markings. Nothing. No writing, no indication of its origin or purpose. Just a mysterious, smooth sphere sitting silently in the wilderness. The metal orb was just sitting there, out of place, with no lights, no indication of what it was. I spent around 15 minutes circling it, trying to understand how it got there. There was no sign of impact or crater, and it seemed deliberately placed. I tried nudging it with my boot, but it was lodged too deep in the soil and didn't move. A strange feeling started to creep over me. It wasn't sickness, but more like being watched. The air felt heavier, and the environment was unnaturally still. No birds, no wind, just complete silence. My ears felt plugged, similar to the sensation of driving up a mountain too quickly. When I tried to take a picture with my phone, the camera app wouldn't open. Restarting didn't help. The screen remained black. My GPS app froze, and I watched my battery drop from 76% to 0 in an instant. My backup battery pack was useless, and even my reliable Garmin unit wouldn't boot up. I initially thought it might be a solar flare, though I'd never experienced anything like this before. After standing there for a while, I decided to head back, marking the location carefully in my mind. A big split pine up the ridge, a rocky outcrop to the west, and a frost-patched clearing. It was about 1.5 miles from my camp. Back at my tent, everything worked perfectly. My phone turned on, GPS reset, and the camera functioned normally. I even took a photo of the stove to confirm. I wondered if I'd encountered some bizarre dead zone, though nothing like this had ever happened to me before. That night was restless. The woods felt paused, completely silent. No wind, no wildlife, not even the usual brush rustling. Early Sunday morning, I returned to check the sphere again, hoping to take a proper photo and investigate more closely. But the sphere was gone. Everything, else remained exactly the same. The clearing, the rock outcrop, the pine, the frost, all untouched. No hole, no tracks, no disturbance. The frost was undisturbed right where the sphere had been, looking as if nothing had been there for days. I walked in circles, trying to convince myself I was in the wrong spot, but I knew I wasn't. Late October brought a crisp, clear night to the Ida Mountains. I'd parked at a small turnout near the trailhead around 8:40 p.m., my usual time for night hiking. Southeast Oklahoma's pine forests were quiet, with just wind rustling through branches and distant owl calls. The trail was peaceful and empty, exactly as I preferred. My headlamp cut through the darkness, casting shadows under the half-moon. Around 11:15, I stopped at an overlook with a view down into the valley. I sat on a flat rock, ate a protein bar, and switched off my light to absorb the silence. That's when I noticed something unusual. Three faint, bluish-white lights hung in the sky, barely visible through the treetops. They weren't like typical aircraft lights, no blinking, just a steady glow. Perfectly positioned in a triangle, they maintained exact spacing across the valley. I might have missed them if I hadn't been sitting still. After returning, everything felt different. I packed up camp before noon, hiking out faster than normal. No breakfast, no coffee. I kept glancing behind me, feeling like something might emerge from the woods. The truck couldn't come soon enough. In Vernal, I took a cheap motel room. I couldn't bear another night outdoors. Since then, I've only told two people, Tyler and a hunting buddy. Neither believes me. I understand their skepticism. If someone shared this story with me, I'd doubt it too. But I know what I experienced. I touched something, smooth, warm metal in the freezing air. It felt like it was waiting. Waiting for what? I still can't explain. I kept moving, but something felt off. At first it was just a glimpse, something gliding silently over the ridge just above the treetops. No typical aircraft signs, no blinking lights, no contrails, no engine noise. It moved unnaturally, sliding smoothly as if on invisible tracks, without disturbing the air or trees. A strange sensation crept over me. I turned my headlamp back on, feeling exposed. The idea that if I could see it, it might see me made my skin crawl. My pace quickened, and I tried not to look back too often. That tight, watchful feeling lingered in my gut. I found myself repeatedly switching off my light, listening intently. The forest was eerily silent. No wind, no insects, no rustling. Just a heavy, oppressive stillness. Then came the smell. About 20 minutes from the trail's highest point, a sharp scent hit me. Not sulfur or decay, but like scorched plastic or a hot circuit board. It was subtle yet persistent, which was unusual. Woodland smells typically drift and change, but this remained constant. Scanning the trees revealed nothing. No smoke, no fire, just that artificial odor hanging in the air. I moved cautiously, trying to stay quiet. At first, silence. Then, soft branch movements to my left. Not the sound of breaking twigs or animal steps, but a smooth, consistent motion, as if something large was gliding just behind the tree line, matching my pace. My light revealed nothing, but the movement stopped when I stopped. After a long wait, I continued, and the soft swaying of underbrush resumed. I deliberately increased my speed without running, wanting to avoid drawing attention. Surprisingly, the sound didn't follow. As I reached the ridge, both the strange smell and movement vanished. Near a clearing where the trail runs along the hillside, with moonlight casting everything in silver, I saw it again. A triangular shape, hanging motionless about 100 yards above the trees, with those same faint, barely perceptible lights. I wasn't supposed to be on that trail. Officially it's closed, fenced off with warnings, but I knew the area well and had hiked it many times before. That night was different from the start. At each corner, everything was unnaturally still. No movement, no sound, not even the usual wind at that elevation. I killed my headlamp and crouched down by the brush, watching carefully. The object wasn't like a drone. It didn't hover or wobble or flicker. It was completely motionless. After about 30 seconds, it began to move, not toward or away from me, but sliding sideways. Perfectly level, it glided over the canopy as if it were part of the sky itself. Then I noticed something strange about the stars. Inside the triangle-shaped object, the sky was completely black. Not just dark, but empty, like a hole in the night. Even the faintest stars visible elsewhere were completely blocked out. I remained crouched until it disappeared behind some trees. When I finally finished the trail loop, I hurried back to my car, my nerves on edge. Sitting in the driver's seat, I realized something was wrong. My phone showed 2:47 a.m., which made no sense. This trail usually took 4 or 5 hours, and I hadn't stopped long enough to lose so much time. My tracking app confirmed something odd. There was a big stretch with no log data. The GPS showed a straight line across a section that should have had several curves. The time gap matched exactly how much time I seemed to have lost. I drove home in complete silence, gripping the steering wheel and watching the roadside trees. After that night, I stopped hiking after dark. These days, I stick to open trails with cell signal and other people nearby. I never encountered that burning plastic smell again. I never saw those lights. But sometimes, lying in bed, I think about how quiet that thing was. how close it was, how it moved like it didn't care whether I saw it or not. Or maybe it did. Red Rock Ridge is a trail just outside Fort Bliss near El Paso, Texas. I'd hiked the legal sections before, but this morning in early April, around 7 a.m., I accidentally went past the closed gate. The desert was cool but warming quickly, with a mostly clear sky and a few high clouds. My pack was light, just water, snacks, a map, phone, and flashlight. I wore hiking boots and my usual jacket, planning to turn back if a patrol appeared. The narrow rocky path wound through sparse scrub and juniper trees. Suddenly, the terrain changed. Dark, irregular patches covered the ground, looking like massive scorch marks about 2 or 3 feet wide. These weren't typical burn sites. The earth was blackened and cracked, but no ashes or charred wood were visible. A sharp smell hung in the air, hot metal mixed with something like post-storm ozone. It wasn't strong, but definitely present. I stopped and crouched down, poking the ground with a stick. The dirt was dry and powdery, unlike normal burned earth. As I continued, an eerie silence descended. No birds, no insects, nothing moved. I checked my phone, no signal, which wasn't unusual out here. But the quiet felt different, heavier somehow. About a quarter-mile further, more black patches appeared, some as large as a car. The trail opened into a small clearing ringed by low rocks. No fire pit, no trash, no footprints except my own. The strange metallic smell intensified. I breathed shallowly, not wanting to get dizzy. A light static electricity seemed to buzz across my skin. Something was definitely not right. The clearing was warm, but something felt off. A faint shimmer hung in the air about 30 feet ahead, near one of the blackened ground patches. It wasn't like a normal heat haze. This was different. The light bent strangely through it, warping everything behind into a wavy distortion. I couldn't look away. The air around this spot felt noticeably cooler, and an intense smell hit my nostrils. Hot metal mixed with something sharp and electric. My first thought was maybe a gas leak or some military experiment. Despite feeling uneasy, curiosity pulled me closer. Stepping carefully to avoid the scorched ground, I moved forward. About 10 feet from the shimmer, a low vibration began humming beneath my feet. Static electricity made my hair stand on end and my skin prickled. The burning wire smell intensified. Suddenly, the shimmer pulsed brighter. The air rippled violently, like a pond disturbed by a stone. Inside, I glimpsed a faint, blurry shape, roughly the size of a tall figure. It wasn't solid, more like a shifting shadow that wasn't quite there but somehow present. My heart raced. I wanted to run but couldn't move. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the shimmer vanished, the vibration stopped, the smell disappeared. The clearing returned to normal, with the scorched patches looking slightly less dark. I didn't wait around. Walking back down the trail, I quickened my pace, constantly looking over my shoulder. Minutes later, a soft thump like a falling rock broke the silence. I was 16 when it happened, just having bought my first real camera, a Canon T6i second-hand from a guy in town who'd upgraded. For weeks, I'd been experimenting with long-exposure astrophotography, mostly shooting out in the field behind our house in central Oregon. We lived near Prill, surrounded by nothing but pasture and juniper trees for miles. No streetlights, barely any light pollution, perfect for capturing the stars. That night in early August, with the Percades meteor shower expected, I dragged out my tripod and gear around 10:30 p.m. I set up at the edge of our backyard and started doing 20-second exposures of the northeast sky. My shutter was on a 2-second timer to minimize shake, and I'd shoot batches of 10 or 15 images before heading inside to load them up and see what I'd captured. The evening was warm, upper 60s, with only crickets and the occasional distant coyote breaking the silence. My first batch of photos looked normal. Clear skies, some faint meteors, the Milky Way coming through nicely. I adjusted the ISO and took a few darker exposures. Years later, I found myself stopped dead on a trail, heart racing. Nothing ahead, no animals, no wind. Another thump came closer this time, coming from the bushes to the right of the trail. I pulled out my phone, using the flashlight even though I knew I wouldn't get a signal. The beam cut through the scrub and shadows, revealing nothing. I called out, "Hello," my voice unnaturally loud in the stillness. No reply. I kept moving, glancing back, feeling watched, but seeing nothing. By the time I reached the fence at the trailhead, The sun was higher, warming the air, and the usual desert sounds returned. Birds calling, a lizard scuttling across rocks. I climbed through the fence and hurried to my truck, locking the doors once inside. Sitting there, I tried to make sense of what I'd seen. The scorched earth, the strange smell, that shimmer, and the vague shape that didn't add up. The military base acknowledged no exercises or incidents that morning. Online searches revealed no reports of wildfires, explosions, or strange activity. I've been back to legal trails nearby, but avoided Red Rock Ridge ever since. Sometimes I think about that place, the silence, the smell, the way the air looked like it was bending around something invisible. I don't know what I saw, and I'm not sure I want to. I was out taking night sky photos, doing what I usually do. I'd taken a series of shots, then switched to a wider angle. Around 11:20, I did another set of 15 exposures, all in a row with the same settings and angle. Nothing special. When I loaded the images onto my SD card, something caught my eye in the second shot. A perfectly straight line of white dots ran, left to right, slightly upward across the frame. They looked like a delicate chain of pearls, not streaked or blurred, just a dozen small white lights hovering mid-frame. This didn't look like any aircraft I'd seen before. No red or green navigation lights, no blinking, and no extended light trail like you'd normally expect. These lights were fixed, clear, and completely silent. What made it even stranger was that the images immediately before and after showed absolutely nothing. Same angle, same exposure, taken within seconds. I checked the timestamps. First shot at 11:23 p.m., the shot with the lights at 11:36, and the third shot at 11:59. Only that brief 23-second window captured these mysterious lights, and there was no accompanying sound. I rushed outside and scanned the sky. Nothing. No trails, no moving lights, no satellites. I watched for about 10 minutes, and not even a plane crossed my view. Back inside, I zoomed in on the image. Each dot was uniform. Same brightness, same spacing, no distortion. They didn't look like lens flares or reflections. Too consistent. If these were satellite trains like Starlink, I should have seen some movement across multiple frames. But they appeared only in that single shot. I tried recreating the image, went out the next night, same time, same angle, same everything. Nothing. I repeated this for 3 consecutive nights, but still captured nothing unusual. A few days later, I showed the photo to my science teacher, Mr. Dent, who was into astronomy and had previously helped me with camera settings. He initially suggested satellites, but when I explained the precise timing and that they appeared only in one exposure, he seemed uncertain. He just handed the photo back and told me to keep shooting. I uploaded the image to a private Flickr folder, never sharing it publicly. Something about those lights made me uneasy. 2 nights after taking the photo, I woke around 2 a.m. to a soft noise outside my window, a gentle humming like power lines on a quiet summer evening. It started with the humming. About a year ago, I moved out to a small place just outside of Ajo, Arizona, inheriting some land from my uncle after he passed. It wasn't much. A beaten-up house sitting on a few acres of dry, cracked earth, surrounded by nothing but scrub brush, old mining roads, and the occasional javina. I was seeking quiet. No neighbors, no traffic, no streetlights. And that's exactly what I got. The house was nothing special, a single-story building with sun-faded siding, creaky floors, and a leaky swamp cooler. I fixed it up as best I could. Painted the walls, patched the roof, installed solar panels. By the time summer rolled around, it felt like mine. About 3 weeks after moving in, I started noticing the sound. It was really hot. That low buzzing drone you feel more than hear. I pulled back the curtain and looked out. No lights in the yard, but the sound remained steady, unchanging. In my socks, I stepped outside and stood by the tripod I'd left out. The hum grew slightly louder as I moved away from the house. It didn't seem to be coming from above. Instead, it felt omnipresent, surrounding me from all directions. I stood there for a few minutes, unsure what I expected to see. The sky was clear, no planes, meteors, or clouds. The stars looked normal, yet something felt off. Suddenly, the humming stopped, not faded, just gone, as if it had never existed. I went back inside, locked the door, and sat in the dark. My chest felt tight, like I'd just come down from an adrenaline spike, though nothing had really happened. The next morning, I checked the camera I'd left running that night. It had captured several hundred exposures. Most were normal, but around 2:03 a.m., one photo stood out. The entire frame was white, overexposed, blown out. The exit data showed 20 seconds, just like the other eye, Mage's. The preceding photo was fine, while the next was black, as if the shutter never opened. Then everything returned to normal. I checked the lens, nothing wrong. The battery was fine. I reset everything and continued shooting that night. All subsequent images were normal. Since then, I've taken probably 1,000 exposures. I've never seen that line of lights again, but I still have the image. I don't show it to people anymore. I'm not sure why. When the sound first woke me, I barely registered it. At first, I thought it was just something rattling outside in the wind, but the air was completely still. This wasn't wind. It was a low, steady hum that seemed to come from deep underground or far away. More felt than heard, it vibrated through my chest with an unusual consistency. I glanced at the clock, exactly 1:17 a.m. I waited, wondering if it might be some distant machinery, maybe a pump near the mines. But those sites were almost 10 miles away, and I'd never heard anything like this before. Still, I didn't think much of it that first night. But then it happened again. Next night, precisely 1:17 a.m. Same deep hum, same strange pressure in the air. It didn't gradually build or fade, it simply clicked on like someone flipping a switch. I sat up and listened carefully. No engines, no wind, nothing outside my window seemed to explain it. When I stepped onto the porch barefoot and opened the screen door, the hum vanished instantly. Complete silence, just desert, stars, and my own breathing. The buzzing in my head disappeared the moment I stepped outside. This pattern continued. Each night, the hum would start at 1:17, lasting about 6 minutes before stopping abruptly. I began setting an alarm for 1:15, waiting and watching. I tried recording it on my phone, but captured nothing, just silence. Even when I pressed the phone against the wall where the sound felt strongest, no trace remained. The precision unnerved me. Not a second off. The sound would click on exactly as the clock's numbers turned. Something felt fundamentally unnatural about that rhythm. As days passed, other strange occurrences began. My porch light would flicker with a single pulse right when the hum started. One night I woke to find the TV on, displaying nothing but static, and I don't even have cable. By the end of the week, I wasn't exactly scared, but I felt distinctly unsettled, like something was watching me. My TV was a cheap old thing that only picked up 2 channels, barely functioning at that hour. But something was happening. Faint shadows danced behind the static, barely visible. White noise hummed softly. A few nights later, I noticed a strange metallic taste in my mouth, like old pennies. It was subtle, but once detected, impossible to ignore. My rescue dog Sadi, who never normally barks, started acting strange around 1 a.m. She'd pace in tight circles, ears twitching, low growls rumbling in her throat. I tried rationalizing it. Maybe a substation in the hills was cycling on a timer, or perhaps the solar battery inverter was malfunctioning. But these explanations fell apart when I realized the phenomenon always stopped when I opened the door, and my dog clearly sensed something too. One night I decided to investigate. I sat on the porch swing early, around 1:10, wrapped in a blanket with all lights off. I wanted to see if it would still occur if I was already outside. Nothing happened. 1:17 came and went. The night remained quiet and normal. But the moment I returned inside and locked the door, the hum started almost immediately. When I rushed back outside, it cut off again. This strange occurrence burrowed deep into my mind. I became obsessed. My routine changed completely. I started sleeping during the day and staying awake at night. I'd sit with a flashlight, watching clocks, avoiding turning on lights after dark. I'd wait, watching the second hand creep toward 1:17, a time that never missed. One night, I placed a glass of water on the kitchen table and sat nearby. When the hum began, the water rippled slightly, tiny concentric rings forming as if something gently shook the table. My hand detected no vibration, yet the water continued moving. The next night, I tried again with flour. I dusted the counter, created a clean square, and sat across the room. At 1:17, I turned on the flashlight. 3 tiny indentations appeared in a perfect triangle, like something had lightly touched the surface from above. I photographed the marks, but by morning they had faded. About a week later, it simply stopped. No warning, no change in routine. One night, it didn't come. I waited. Nothing. I stayed up until 3, listening. Slept on the couch just in case. Still nothing. The next night, the same. It's been almost 5 months now. The sound hasn't repeated, but my body seems trained to wake up at 117 anyway. Sadi still twitches in her sleep around that time. Last week, something caught my eye on the side of the house, high up near the roof. A burn mark, maybe 3 inches across, with smooth edges barely visible unless the light catches it just right. Shaped like a circle with a smaller circle inside, something I'd never noticed before. It was late April, just before dawn, and I was out by the outskirts of Amarillo, Texas, preparing to launch a weather balloon. The air was cool, but already hinting at the heat to come. As a meteorologist for a small private research outfit, my work was mostly routine, sending balloons up to gather upper atmosphere data for storm forecasting. Nothing glamorous, just charts and numbers. But I loved being out where the sky stretched wide and empty. That morning's launch was typical. We set up the balloon and payload with sensors, radios, and a tiny downward-facing camera. Most of the process was automated, except for launch and tracking. I stood next to the basket, watching it rise, getting smaller and smaller, drifting east with the morning wind. My radio scanner picked up air traffic chatter from nearby commercial flights. The sunrise was coming fast, painting everything pale gold. As I pulled out my binoculars to scan the horizon, something caught my attention. A tiny bright dot high up, too small to be certain, but not moving like a plane or bird. It just hung there, seemingly watching. I initially thought it might be a weather satellite or research drone, but something felt off. The light was a sharp silver, constant and smooth, reflecting the sun without blinking or flashing. No navigation lights, no wings or rotors. I adjusted my binoculars for a better look. The object appeared small, maybe a few feet wide, hovering almost perfectly motionless against the pale blue sky. No sound, no contrails, just a smooth metallic glint suspended in space. I tapped the radio, ready to call over to my colleagues. The weather balloon launch from Amarillo was tracking normally at first. I was monitoring its telemetry on my laptop, watching the data scroll by when something caught my eye. The GPS altitude was fluctuating more than usual. Not dramatically, but enough to seem slightly off. I scanned the sky and noticed a small object about 20,000 feet up, slightly north of my location. When I radioed air traffic control to ask about potential traffic, static filled the channel before a calm male voice responded. "No known traffic in the area at that altitude," he said. Nothing on radar matching my description. I checked the balloon's camera feed, which was pointing downward but caught a slice of sky above the horizon. Gradually, a tiny shape edged into view, perfectly round, smooth, and gleaming. The object hung motionless, maybe 5,000 feet higher than the balloon's climbing altitude, now approaching 23,000 feet and entering G commercial airspace. The balloon's ascent rate suddenly dropped and leveled off. Outside, a wind gust rattled the ground equipment as the morning temperature started to rise. The object remained stationary, like a silent watcher catching sunlight in a way that made its metallic surface look almost liquid. I knew I should probably contact the FAA or military, but something held me back. The object wasn't doing anything threatening. For another 20 minutes, I watched through binoculars in my screen as the balloon began its expected descent. A small commercial jet crossed the horizon heading west, well below the object, and its pilot reported nothing unusual. I pulled my jacket tighter as the sun rose fully, continuing to observe the mysterious, unmoving shape suspended high above the landscape. I was out flying my drone one Saturday evening in early September, just past sunset on the outskirts of northern Vermont. The air held a warm crispness that whispered of approaching autumn. I like these late-day flights when soft light casts dramatic shadows across trees and hills. My spot was a quiet clearing off a gravel road, surrounded by dense forest, perfect for uninterrupted flying. During the weather balloon launch weeks earlier, something strange had happened. At an altitude below 15,000 feet, the object simply vanished. 1 second present, the next completely gone. No flash, no noise, no trail, just disappeared. I scanned the sky for 5 minutes afterward, finding nothing. The balloon's parachute deployed as planned, drifting gently down about 50 meters east of Amarillo. Later that afternoon, I retrieved it and returned to the office to review the flight data. Altitude fluctuations during the ascent made me uneasy, as if something had affected the balloon's buoyancy or pushed against it. Yet the sensors showed no signs of interference, no electromagnetic spikes, nothing unusual beyond those weird altitude changes. I sent my supervisor the camera footage, cropping it to the sky section where the object appeared. The file looked grainy and distorted, almost as if the camera sensor struggled to focus. The light seemed to bend oddly around the object. By the next day, that footage was gone. My supervisor claimed it was lost during transfer, a server error or hard drive crash. When I requested backups, none existed. The following week, I contacted the FAA to inquire about unusual reports or radar logs from the launch time. They confirmed everything was normal, no unknown objects detected, only scheduled commercial traffic. No one else saw anything. No reports came in. The weather balloon program continued unchanged, but I couldn't shake the memory of that smooth, silent silver dot hovering in the sky. Sometimes when I'm looking at the clouds, I wonder if it's still out there somewhere, waiting motionless and unseen. Last year, I got a DJI drone that I usually fly around for fun, recording video and playing with the footage afterward. It's usually a pretty relaxing hobby. But this one particular flight was different. Something happened that I still can't quite explain. I was flying about 200 feet above the treetops, making a wide circle and watching the camera feed on my phone. The light was fading when I noticed a dark shape hovering low on the horizon, maybe a mile away. At first, I thought it might be a bird or helicopter, but there was no sound at all. Zooming in with the drone's camera, I saw the object was completely dark, with no visible wings or tail rotor. It just sat there, motionless. While I kept filming and trying to track it, suddenly it moved, not gradually, but incredibly fast. In an instant, it shot straight up into the low clouds above. When I got home and started reviewing the footage, things got even stranger. During those 4 seconds of the object's ascent, the video feed completely corrupted. The screen went fuzzy and pixelated in a way I'd never seen before, like the data was missing or scrambled. Everything before and after those seconds was crystal clear. I checked the drone's SD card, no issues, plenty of space. I tried repairing the file with video software, but it only fixed the surrounding sections. That 4-second chunk remained unreadable and glitchy. This was bizarre because I'd flown the drone in much worse conditions near power lines and dense trees without any problems. The next day, I even flew over the same spot at the same time. Nothing unusual happened. That night, after the footage corrupted, I remember sitting on the edge of the clearing, staring up where the shape had disappeared. The sky was mostly clear except for low, thick clouds. The entire forest felt silent, like it was holding its breath or waiting for something. I never saw or heard anything else that night. No other drones, no helicopters, nothing strange on the ground. But the way that shape rocketed straight up and the footage got messed up precisely at that moment, that's what haunts me. It was like the drone couldn't handle whatever was happening. Or maybe, just maybe, it wasn't meant to be recorded. I was working a contract gig for a civilian aerospace company near White Sands last September west of Alamogordo. The job was a high-altitude weather balloon test, a routine mission I'd done several times before. Nothing exciting, just hot, quiet desert work. Rob Lane, an ex-Air Force weather tech, handled most of the equipment while I monitored visuals and GPS. We arrived at the site around 5:30 a.m. The landscape was nothing but open scrub land with a few dirt roads and distant fencing. The sun hadn't risen, but there was enough light from the horizon to start preparing. The stillness was eerie. No birds, no insects, just the sound of our gear and occasional gravel crunches under our boots. At 6:12, we launched the balloon. It caught the morning light beautifully, gleaming as it drifted almost motionless before starting its slow climb. I logged the time and initial altitude. Everything seemed smooth. We watched it ascend to about 30,000 feet over the next 40 minutes. Telemetry remained steady, wind speed, temperature, and barometric pressure all normal. Then, around 6:52, our data feed started acting strange. First, it lagged, then froze completely. The GPS locked up at 31,200 feet. I initially thought it might be a loose antenna or terrain interference, but there was nothing out there to block line of sight. It simply dropped out. Afterward, I didn't share much about what happened. A few friends who saw the footage dismissed it as a technical glitch, maybe signal interference, but I couldn't shake the feeling something more was going on. What I captured that evening wasn't a bird or a plane, and it wasn't natural. It was just weird and sudden. Now, I still fly my drone occasionally, but I avoid that specific location. The footage sits on my hard drive, mostly untouched. I keep trying to clean up those 4 seconds to get a clear look at what I recorded. Each time, the same corruption appears. Maybe it's just a technical anomaly, or maybe something else entirely. Either way, it's the kind of experience you can't forget, even if you want to. He rebooted the receiver, toggled the gain settings. A few swear words slipped out as he rechecked connections. Then he stopped mid-motion. "That's not right," he said, pointing at the monitor. The waveform showed a repeating static spike across the spectrum, not random noise, but an almost rhythmic interference pattern. We'd seen signal anomalies before, but this was different, sharp, regular, strong. I stepped back to get a better view of the sky. A tiny pale balloon dot was still drifting upward. Suddenly a flash. A thin streak of white-blue light shot across the sky from southwest to northeast just above the balloon. It moved so fast I could barely register it. One blink and it vanished. No sound. No trail. I turned to Rob. "Did you see that?" He didn't respond, just stared at the monitor, seemingly deaf to my question. Seconds later, the receiver shut down completely. Power was still on, but all data feeds were dead. Swapping out the logging tablet did nothing. The balloon signal was gone. We stood in total silence, scanning the sky. The sun broke the horizon, painting everything orange and gold. Where the balloon had been was now just open sky. No dot, no trail. Then a low hum emerged. Not mechanical, not like any engine. A deep, smooth tone that seemed to come from nowhere. It lasted just seconds. So subtle you might have missed it. "I think we should pack it in," Rob said. I didn't argue. We started coiling cables and dismantling the antenna mast. I kept looking up, half expecting another flash or a shadow. Nothing. But something felt present, just beyond perception. As we stowed the equipment, the air became unnaturally still, dead calm. No breeze, which was rare in this area. The truck's antenna flag hung flat, like glued in place. I checked the portable barometer. The pressure had jumped slightly, contrary to the usual morning drop. Rob noticed too, but remained silent. On the drive back, Rob was unusually quiet. Normally he'd be talking, complaining about something or other. Not today. Here's the rewritten version. "Last October, I was driving from El Paso to Albuquerque on a Friday night, later than usual. The road stretched out like an endless black ribbon, with nothing but desert on both sides. I'd hit the highway around 7:30 p.m., hoping to make it to Albuquerque before midnight. After passing Los Cruces, the landscape turned eerily quiet. Around 9:30, I stopped at a half-abandoned gas station near Truth or Consequences, grabbed a Red Bull and peanuts, and stretched my legs. Back on the road, something caught my attention. About 10 minutes after leaving the gas station, I noticed a single bright white light in my rearview mirror. It wasn't like typical headlights, more like an intense spotlight, hovering exactly a quarter-mile behind me. At first, I thought it might be a motorcycle, but the light was too powerful and steady. I'd speed up from 70 to 80, but the light remained unchanged, perfectly matching my speed. This reminded me of a balloon launch from months earlier. Rob and I had been tracking a research balloon that lost signal around 30,000 feet. When we reported to our supervisor, Jeff, Rob seemed unusually unsettled. He suggested not even trying to recover the payload, which was unlike him. He typically loved chasing down lost equipment. The next day, I went out with another technician to search the projected drop zone. We found nothing. No parachute, no payload. It was as if the entire thing had vanished, despite calculations showing it should have landed within a 5-meter radius. A week later, I asked Rob about what happened. He was cryptic, simply shaking his head and saying, "Wasn't a plane, wasn't a satellite, and it sure as hell wasn't weather." He declared it was the last balloon launch he'd ever do. As for that night driving through New Mexico, the mysterious light continued to follow me, silent and unchanging. The desert highway stretched out before me, empty and silent. A white light appeared in my rearview mirror, staying perfectly still no matter how I drove. At first, I wasn't scared, just unsettled. I tried everything to shake it, slowing down to 60, flashing my brights, even pulling over onto the shoulder. The light remained unchanged, hovering about 3 or 4 car lengths behind me, bright as a stadium lamp. When I stepped out of the car, the brightness was overwhelming. I couldn't look directly at it. There was no vehicle, no sound, just this massive, white orb sitting low on the asphalt. After maybe 20 seconds, it vanished completely, not fading, but switching off instantly like a light. One moment it illuminated the desert, the next everything was pitch black. I stood scanning the horizon. Nothing moved. The road remained empty, stars overhead, my engine ticking softly as it cooled. Back in the car, I kept checking my mirror, expecting the light to reappear. But nothing came. No cars, no movement. The silence felt strange, unnatural. Even passing the small exit near San Antonio, just a tiny dirt turnout with a cattle guard, I saw no other vehicles. The road remained completely deserted in both directions. Only when I reached Socorro's outskirts and saw some merging taillights did everything feel normal again, like the air had shifted back to its proper state. I didn't share this story for a long time, not because I doubted what happened, but because I knew how crazy it would sound. I wasn't tired or hallucinating. Something genuinely weird had occurred out there in the desert that night. I'm an amateur astronomer in Flagstaff, Arizona, where low-light pollution makes stargazing incredible. My setup is basic: a decent telescope, some star charts, and a DSLR for occasional photography. Most nights I spend hours tracking constellations and exploring the night sky. One early spring evening, around 11:30 p.m., the air was dry and crisp. A thin crescent moon meant the sky was exceptionally dark. I had been studying the Hercules cluster, taking long exposure shots and zooming in and out to capture faint stars. Everything seemed normal until something strange happened. I was focused on a familiar star cluster, noting how sharp and steady the stars looked. Suddenly, through my telescope's eyepiece, the entire cluster vanished, not dimmed or flickered, but completely disappeared. It was like someone had flipped a switch. I blinked and adjusted the telescope, wondering if I'd lost focus or if clouds were moving in. But the surrounding sky remained unchanged. Only this perfect circle of 10 or 12 stars had vanished. Precisely timing the event with my watch, I confirmed it lasted exactly 3 seconds. Just as abruptly as they disappeared, the stars reappeared in their original positions. My heart raced as I tried to comprehend what I'd witnessed. I scanned the clear sky, searching for any explanation. Finding none, I wondered if I'd imagined the entire event. After waiting and refocusing, I observed the same spot again. About 10 minutes later, the stars flickered once more, this time not completely vanishing, but dramatically dimming. I still don't know what caused this phenomenon. The light was real. I saw it with my own eyes for almost an hour, and the mystery remains unsolved. I've always loved the solitude of desert drives, where the silence stretches wider than the landscape itself. But that night was different. I was out with my telescope, scanning the sky in an isolated backyard surrounded by tall pines. The star cluster looked normal at first, perfectly visible through my lens. Then something strange happened. The stars slowly dimmed and vanished completely for about 3 seconds, then brightened back up just as subtly. When I checked my phone's photos, the sequence was bizarre. The first few shots showed the star cluster clearly, but in the frame where they disappeared, there was just a black void against the night sky. I showed the images to astronomy-loving friends, hoping for an explanation. They tossed out theories, camera glitches, atmospheric interference, but nothing convincingly explained a star cluster's perfect sudden disappearance. The next morning, I scoured online sky trackers and astronomical reports. No meteor showers, no solar flares, nothing that could account for this phenomenon. Curiosity drew me back that night. Through the telescope, the SAM-E sky section started to shimmer faintly, like heat waves in cold air. The stars flickered erratically, almost seeming to blink in and out of existence. Something felt fundamentally wrong. The sky itself seemed unstable. Unsettled, I packed up early. The images on my phone felt increasingly ominous. After a couple of days, I deleted them, feeling that prolonged viewing might draw me into whatever inexplicable weirdness I'd witnessed. Since then, I've been cautious. I still stargaze, but I avoid that particular section of sky, sticking to familiar, stable constellations. I can't explain what happened. The stars genuinely disappeared and reappeared. No scientific explanation fits. All I know is what I saw was real. So I'll keep looking up, just not quite as closely as before. Last September, I headed out near the Mojave, just west of Baker, California, for a few nights of camping, hiking, and stargazing. Nothing fancy. I just wanted to get away from everything. The late afternoon sun was casting an orange glow on the sand and rocks as I found a small, unmarked pullout off an old dirt road that seemed flat enough for parking. I stretched my legs right where I planned to camp for the night. The air was dry but warm, the kind of heat that settles into your skin during the day and quickly cools after sunset. Instead of setting up a tent, I simply threw a sleeping bag in the back of my old pickup, planning to crash there and maybe catch some stars before turning in. After a quick dinner and some water, I leaned back in the driver's seat, cracked the windows open, and watched the sky darken. Around 11:30 p.m., I drifted off to sleep. Something felt off when I woke up. The truck didn't seem to be where I'd left it. At first, I just lay there squinting into the darkness, trying to make sense of what was wrong. When I fully opened my eyes, I realized I wasn't parked against the slope I'd originally chosen. The truck had moved about 30 feet down the road, closer to the edge of the dirt track and facing a slightly different angle. The headlights were off, the engine was cold, and I had no memory of moving it. I sat up quickly and grabbed my flashlight from the console. Its beam cut through the darkness as I jumped out and walked around the truck. My boots sank into the loose sand while I searched for tire tracks, but there were none. I scanned the dirt road back the way I'd come in, looking for any signs of movement. Nothing. No tire marks, no footprints, no indication of how the truck had ended up there. The sand was completely smooth and untouched, as if the truck had simply slid or floated into position. It was impossible. I double-checked the truck's surroundings, finding no branches caught under the bumper, no bumps or scrapes. Everything looked normal, except that the truck was definitely not where I'd originally parked. I knew exactly where I'd left it. I'd carefully scouted the spot earlier to avoid rocks and dips. This wasn't just a slight shift. It was 30 feet away. I returned to my original parking spot, scanning the ground. My sleeping bag and gear lay exactly where I'd tossed them before climbing out. The terrain underneath looked completely untouched. No sign suggested I'd moved anything. Something felt off. I hadn't remembered moving the truck, and no evidence indicated anyone else had been here. No footprints, no tire tracks, no campfires, no other vehicles. Just me, alone in the desert. I sat in the truck, lights off, listening. Wind whispered against distant rocks. A coyote howled far away. Silence surrounded me. No voices, no engines, nothing. My mind raced through possibilities. Could I have sleepwalked? That wasn't like me. Had someone moved the truck? But why no tracks? Why no human presence? If someone was out here, why hadn't I heard them? Shadows beyond the road made me uneasy. Something might be watching just past the light's edge. I checked the truck thoroughly. Doors locked, keys in my pocket, interior unchanged, radio off, seats undisturbed. The odometer matched my previous stop. I started the engine and backed up, turning around. The headlights revealed something strange. A faint circular pattern pressed into the sand. About 3 feet wide, it looked like something had rested there. No scorch marks, no crushed vegetation, just sand, compressed and swirled oddly. This pattern matched no tire or footprint I recognized. I tried to photograph it, but my phone had no signal. The camera worked, though. Looking up, I caught a strange shimmer in the cool air, like a heat ripple, but impossible. It remained steady, then slowly faded. The circle in the sand, the truck's unexplained movement. Something wasn't right. I packed my gear quickly and drove toward the highway, constantly checking the rearview mirror. No headlights followed. The road behind remained empty. I worked out in the Gulf of Mexico on an offshore oil platform, basically a tiny city in the middle of the ocean. Night shifts were usually quiet, just me and a couple of guys rotating through, keeping an eye on the equipment and logging data. The constant hum of machines, the smell of salt and oil mixing in the air, and the endless dark water became familiar over time. That night in late May was different. Around midnight, The weather was unusually calm. Usually, there's at least a breeze cutting through, but this night the air was still, almost too still. The ocean surface looked like glass. While checking gauges near the drilling tower, I noticed something off in the distance near the horizon. At first, it was just a faint glow, pale blue, like the color of a deep pool under a nightlight. Just a small spot, barely noticeable, but moving slowly against the wind. That caught my attention. The wind was steady from the southwest, but this light was skimming east to west, almost gliding right over the water's surface. I thought it might be a fishing boat with a weird light or a buoy with an electrical fault. But something was off. No sound accompanied it. Normally, you'd hear a boat's engine or some machinery hum, but this was silent. I grabbed my binoculars and focused on it. The light was about the size of a basketball, a perfect sphere glowing softly with no flicker or blinking. It skimmed across the surface with a smooth, fluid motion. No waves or ripples where it passed, which didn't make sense. Later, back at my apartment, I told a few friends what happened. They joked about it being a prank or hallucination, but I know what I saw. I'm not that type of person to make things up. I've driven through that desert stretch dozens of times since then, and I've never seen anything like it again. Sometimes, lying in bed, I still wonder what might have been out there that night, watching or waiting. I haven't told many people because it sounds crazy, but it happened, and I can't shake the memory of that silent, gliding light. The night was pitch black, and the ocean stretched out endlessly around our platform. I was on shift when something caught my eye, a pale blue light moving impossibly smoothly across the water. No boat could move like this. Jake, standing nearby, noticed me staring and walked over. "You seeing this?" I asked, pointing. He squinted and watched. The sphere glided just above the water's surface, leaving absolutely no disturbance behind. No wake, no splash, nothing. The water remained completely calm, which made the whole thing feel surreal. For about 5 minutes we watched in stunned silence. The light moved against the wind, completely silent. Then, without warning, it shot straight up, faster than anything I'd ever seen. In an instant, it was just a blur that vanished into the black sky. No sound, no ripple, just gone. Jake looked at me, ildered. "Did that just happen?" I checked my phone. 12:43 a.m. We scanned the horizon for the next half hour, but nothing remained. The ocean was calm, the stars bright and steady. The next day, I mentioned it during the morning shift. Most guys brushed it off. Probably a fishing buoy or a flare, they said. But I knew what I'd seen was different. I started investigating. The radar logs showed no vessels in the area that night, just a few distant fishing boats miles away. The Coast Guard reported everything was normal, but something was off. In the days that followed, our platform sensors started acting strange during night shifts. Random static on communications, brief equipment glitches, nothing serious, but enough to make everyone uneasy. Jake and I tried to recreate the moment, looking out over the water. But the ocean wasn't the same, and the mysterious sphere never reappeared. After years on this rig, I've seen plenty of strange marine phenomena. But that glowing sphere, moving impossibly and vanishing in an instant, that was something else entirely. The Nevada desert stretched out empty and dark around me as I drove back to Reno from Vegas after a work conference. Late October nights here have a crisp chill that settles in after sunset, and the highway was completely deserted. Miles of road extended before and behind me, with no traffic and no towns in sight. Something caught my eye high in the sky. At first, I thought it was just another cluster of stars. Out here, with zero light pollution, the night sky looks completely different. But these lights were strange. They clustered too tightly, almost like a set of LED bulbs arranged in a specific shape rather than the usual scattered starlight. The lights hung low on the horizon, just above a distant ridge. They didn't blink or move, just maintained a steady, pale blue glow. I slowed down, trying to get a better look. No navigational lights, no red or green markers, just this constant illumination that seemed completely out of place. I kept checking my rearview mirror, expecting to see something that might explain the lights. Nothing was there. No other cars, no aircraft, just the dark desert landscape. Every few minutes, I'd glance back up, and the lights remained exactly the same, fixed in position, unmoving. The road was straight, so I expected the perspective to shift as I drove. But the cluster stayed locked in place, almost like it was attached to the ridge. The ridge itself was completely dark, no reflections or additional lights visible. Stars typically move slowly with the Earth's rotation, but these lights didn't budge an inch. After 40 minutes of watching, I realized these weren't stars. Something else entirely was happening. No one else I've spoken to has reported anything similar, and I can't explain how it moved, or didn't move, without disturbing anything around it. That pale blue glow cutting across the ocean of darkness has been haunting me ever since. The lights had been there from the moment I first noticed them, unmoving and constant. I pulled over at a small turnout, killed the engine, and stepped out to get a better look. Complete silence surrounded me, broken only by distant coyote howls echoing across the landscape. These lights were strange, bright yet soft, like holiday decorations without any visible wiring. They clustered in an unusual geometric pattern I'd never seen in nature. Were they a single object or multiple points? I couldn't tell. My attempt to call my husband failed. No cell signal out here meant my phone was useless. An unsettling feeling crept over me. Not fear exactly, but a growing sense that something wasn't quite right. I'd been watching these lights for over an hour, and they hadn't changed at all. No shift in position, brightness, or color. When I started driving again, they remained exactly where they had been, suspended in the sky. Checking my speedometer confirmed I was moving at a steady 60 miles per hour. Every few miles I'd glance back. The lights persisted. The terrain gradually shifted from rocky to more scrubby, but the lights stayed fixed in place. I pulled over again, retrieving my binoculars from the glove box to get a closer look. Nothing revealed itself. Just a cluster of pale blue-white orbs hanging low in the sky. Then, for the briefest moment, one light flickered, blinking out and instantly returning. That tiny change was the only variation I'd seen. The rest of the drive continued quietly. The engine hummed, and the radio produced nothing but static when I tried to find a station. Those mysterious lights remained suspended behind me, an unexplained presence in the night. I was flying a routine cargo leg from Salt Lake City to Sacramento in a Cessna Citation XL. Empty cabin, just a couple of pallets of small freight. Nothing sensitive. A light load. We'd had a late departure because of weather in Reno, but the skies were smooth by the time I leveled off at 40,000 feet somewhere over northern Nevada. I was on autopilot, sipping bad coffee from a thermos, monitoring the radios. It was about 2:30 in the morning. I'd flown this route dozens of times, usually alone, sometimes with a co-pilot, depending on the contract. That night, it was just me, and it was quiet. No traffic on frequency besides a commercial flight way up north, heading to Seattle and Center, was barely talking. Somewhere west of Battle Mountain, I noticed a light off my left side. At first, I thought it was another aircraft passing opposite direction, high altitude, maybe trans-Pacific. But the position lights were all wrong. There were no red or green nav lights, no strobes, just a dull silver-white glow, round but not beaming. It looked almost like sunlight catching on metal, but the moon was behind me and it wasn't bright enough for a reflection like that. I watched it for maybe 10 seconds before it clicked that it was moving with me. Not toward or away, but with me. Same heading, same speed, same altitude. That got my attention real fast. I leaned forward, checked the TCAST. Nothing. No targets. I called Oakland Center just to be sure. Citation 73, X-ray at 400. Do you have any traffic just off my 9? They came back a few seconds later. Negative. 73 X-ray. You're the only one in that sector. I asked again, clarified that I was seeing something pacing me off the left side. I got back to Reno a few hours later, pulled into my driveway, and glanced up one last time. The cluster was gone. I don't know what the hell those lights were. It was the strangest thing I've ever seen. Sitting in the middle of the desert, staring at something that shouldn't have stayed still for that long or looked like that in the sky. No blinking, no movement, just quiet, steady lights in a pattern I can't explain. I checked the news and weather reports later, but there was nothing. No plane crashes, no military exercises, no meteor showers. I keep thinking about how still the air was and how quiet everything felt, like something else was there, but I couldn't see it. I haven't gone back out that way since. I was working the overnight shift with Bobby on a repaving crew about 40 miles outside Missoula on Highway 200. That stretch between Petoic and Owando is dead quiet at night. No houses, no gas stations, just pine forest and the occasional truck hauling through. It was just after 3 in the morning. I gave my position, heading, and altitude, all the usual. They said nothing unusual. We don't show any traffic within 50 miles. I couldn't identify the object. It was still off my wing, maybe a quarter mile out, but holding perfect formation with me. That's not easy at 450 knots. This wasn't like a balloon or drone. It was steady, effortless, no wobbling, no drifting. Its shape was different, an elongated oval with no wings or tail. Just smooth silver, like liquid metal. No seams, no rivets, no markings. It didn't glow exactly, but caught light in a strange way that made it look faintly luminous. Not casting light, but somehow being light. I watched it for another 30 seconds. Still no movement. It felt like it had locked onto me, studying me. Just as I was about to call center again, it vanished, not banking away or speeding up. It simply blinked out. One moment there, the next gone, like someone cut a hole in the sky and patched it back together. No streak, no sound. My heart was racing. I don't scare easily in the air, but this was different. I scanned everywhere, sky, radar, horizon, nothing. The air remained smooth. Autopilot held steady, all systems normal. Center called back, asked if I still had visual. I said no. They didn't seem surprised, just acknowledged and said they'd file a report. The rest of the flight was uneventful. I landed at Matter just after 3:15. The ramp was quiet. I didn't say anything to the ground crew, just signed the log and went to the hotel. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing keeping pace with me. Smooth and silent, like it was listening or waiting. The next day, I checked the logs. No military activity in the area. No ham radio signals, no weather balloons. I tried pulling flight data from the onboard recorder, but found nothing unusual. No transponder returns besides mine. No TCAS warnings. But I know what I saw, and whatever it wasn't supposed to be there. We were finishing up road work on a quiet May night, just Bobby and me left on the crew. Most of the team had already gone home, and our supervisor Ken was off meeting a tanker truck near Clearwater Junction. Standing in the dark with our safety vests and headlamps, we leaned against the pickup truck. The sky was clear and warm, probably in the high 50s. Everything was bone quiet, so silent you could hear the wind rustling through nearby trees. Around 3:20, Bobby lit a cigarette and made some comment about Orion's belt looking crooked. When I looked up to humor him, I noticed something strange instead of the constellation. Directly overhead, a section of sky had simply vanished, like someone had cut a wide, soft-edged boomerang shape out of the stars. This wasn't a glowing object or something reflecting light. It was just darker than the surrounding sky, moving slowly across our view. Massive in size, it drifted silently from east to west, passing over the highway and trees. No edges were distinct, but you could track its path by the stars it blotted out. No sound accompanied it, no jets, no rotors, nothing. Bobby saw it too. Mid-sentence, he stopped and stared. We watched in complete silence for about 10 seconds. The object didn't cast a shadow, even with our work lights pointed upward. Once it passed, the stars reappeared as if nothing had happened. "What the hell was that?" Bobby finally asked. I had no answer. We stood there a moment longer, then noticed something else unusual. The forest had gone completely silent. No insects, no birds, absolute stillness that seemed to press against our ears. Bobby suggested we wait in the truck, so we got in and sat with the engine off. Just a couple minutes later, sound returned abruptly. Crickets, a distant owl, wind in the branches, like someone had flipped a switch. I started wondering if we'd imagined the whole thing. But we'd both seen the same shape, followed the same path, experienced the same unnatural silence. This was no shared hallucination. Here's the rewritten version. My career as an Air Force mechanic spanned 3 decades, working on planes and helicopters at various bases. I've witnessed plenty of strange things over the years, but this particular incident still unsettles me. It happened during a late-night shift at the Tonopah Test Range in Nevada. The base was remote, and the desert night was unusually cool for July. A low, almost full moon hung in the sky as I made my routine checks on the aircraft parked on the ramp. Something felt different that night. I'd heard whispers about special projects, but always dismissed them as idle chatter. Then everything changed. A convoy of black SUVs rolled up silently, their blue lights flickering in an eerie pattern. They stopped near a distant hangar, far from the main flight lines. My curiosity got the better of me. I followed carefully, using building shadows to stay hidden. The back of the hangar doors were slightly open. What I saw made me stop cold. A flatbed truck carried something strange, covered by a tarp that seemed to swallow light, almost oily in its appearance. Soldiers in full tactical gear stood nearby, their faces tight, radios pressed close. Complete silence surrounded the scene. No engine sounds, no voices, just an oppressive quiet. Later that night, Ken radioed about a delay. A washout past the junction would keep us waiting another 45 minutes. Bobby stayed silent, occasionally glancing up quickly, as if avoiding something. The next day, when Ken asked about the night shift, Bobby simply said it was uneventful. We never discussed it further. Since then, I've driven that route maybe 20 times. Now, I never look up when I'm alone. I caught just a glimpse of something under the tarp. The object was completely smooth, without a single bolt, panel, or rivet. Curved like a flattened oval, its surface looked almost wet, but wasn't shiny. More like a matte black, but darker than anything I'd ever seen. This wasn't any aircraft from the Air Force, Navy, or any contractors I knew. It seemed to absorb the light around it, with no shadow underneath. The tarp dropped back down quickly. Soldiers loaded up and shut the hangar doors fast. I stayed put, waiting for the convoy to move. They didn't leave immediately, sitting there for about 15 minutes, probably waiting for clearance. When they finally rolled out, I followed at a distance, watching them head off base toward a restricted desert section. Nobody ever mentioned this incident. The next morning, I asked around, but people either looked at me like I was imagining things or gave me those tight-lipped, no-comment expressions. So I kept quiet. I wasn't looking to cause trouble or get caught up in rumors, but something about that night lingered. The way the craft seemed almost alive, how the guards treated it like something genuinely dangerous, not just classified, kept nagging at me. Weeks later, I checked logs and base reports for any flights or tests that might explain what I'd seen. Nothing. No records of new aircraft, no unusual activity. It was like the entire thing had never existed. Years passed. I retired, moved to a small Colorado town, trying to leave my Air Force days behind. But on quiet nights, sitting on my porch, that memory would return. The convoy, the object moving through shadows, always just beyond understanding. Sometimes I wonder if anyone else ever saw it. It's like a ghost, something you know is real but can't prove. Something hidden, moving in the dark. And the silence around it speaks louder than any engine I ever worked on. We were camped west of Lake Crescent in Washington, down one of those unmarked Forest Service roads that seems to lead nowhere until suddenly opening into a perfect flat spot, just big enough for a tent and fire ring. My friend Travis had discovered it on an old backpacking forum, claiming it was rarely used and didn't appear on most trail maps. We were camping, looking for some quiet time. Late September, with cool days and cold nights. Our gear was minimal, a two-person tent, foam pads, and the essentials. We arrived early afternoon, hiked around, then set up a small fire and cooked noodles in a titanium pot. By 10, we were in our sleeping bags. Sometime in the night, I woke up. At first I thought it was raining, but the air was dry and cold enough to see my breath inside the tent. No rain, no noise, just a deep, low vibration. It wasn't loud, more like a truck idling nearby, making windows buzz. But there were no trucks, no engines, just a subtle thrum deep in the ground. The vibration wasn't constant. It came in slow pulses, like a heartbeat. I could feel it in my chest and under my spine through the sleeping pad. Travis was awake too. "You feel that?" he whispered. I answered, "Yeah," and we fell silent, listening. Then came a flash, not lightning, no clouds, no thunder. It was a pale bluish light that seemed to emanate from everywhere at once. Not a beam or a shape, just a sudden cold pulse that illuminated the entire tent from the outside. We sat up immediately. Travis unzipped the tent flap and poked his head out, with me leaning over his shoulder. Nothing. No lights, no movement, no sound except wind in the trees. Barefoot and crouching, Travis stepped out, and I followed. The clearing looked unchanged. The fire was out, the sky full of stars, no aircraft, satellites, or drones in sight. But something felt off. Everything was unnaturally still. No crickets, no wind gusts, not even the usual creaks of moving trees. It was dead quiet, as if the entire landscape was holding its breath. We stood there for a full minute. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the vibration stopped, fading out between one breath and the next. We checked around the tent, searching for tire tracks or boot prints that might explain the strange light. Nothing. The ground was completely undisturbed. After that, we didn't talk much. We climbed back into our sleeping bags and lay there. I didn't sleep again. The next morning was normal, with sunlight filtering through. Trees swayed in the usual breeze. Birds chirped, returning to their perches. Everything seemed normal, except for one unsettling detail. A faint metallic odor hung in the tent's air, reminiscent of hot coins or blood. Travis caught it too, but we remained silent while packing up. We hiked out before noon, avoiding discussion until we were halfway back to the car. Even then, we couldn't agree on the light's origin. Travis insisted it illuminated the trees behind the tent, while I was certain it came from above. No ground marks betrayed its presence. I returned alone the following week, searching in daylight. Nothing appeared, yet something had been there that night. Invisible and inaudible, but palpable, a presence moving beneath the trees. My job as a security guard for a small water company in rural Nebraska was typically uneventful. Scattered towns dotted the flat farmland under an expansive sky. Occasional trespassers or broken fences were the extent of excitement. This made the night's events years ago feel particularly jarring. Early October brought a clear evening with a slight chill after dusk. I was concluding my shift at the water treatment plant outside Elm Creek. Security cameras mounted on tall poles near the water towers provided basic monitoring. Motion activated and running a simple loop, they seemed routine. While reviewing the live feeds, ensuring everything appeared normal, something caught my eye around 9:30 p.m. The camera focused on the tallest water tower, a metal structure standing alone in a field, illuminated by a weak street lamp and starlight. Initially, I assumed it was a drone or teenage mischief. But the object's movement defied explanation. A single, round light hovered silently above the water tower. Unlike an airplane's blinking or a helicopter's flash, this was a steady, calm illumination. Pale white with a subtle bluish tint reminiscent of old fluorescent bulbs, it remained perfectly still. I rubbed my eyes, suspecting a lens reflection or camera malfunction. Yet the shape persisted, crisp, undistorted, unwavering. I was out on patrol just before midnight, making my usual rounds through the northern section of Pine Ridge. The night was still, with only the wind rustling through the fields. My camera caught something strange near the water tower, a light that didn't belong. I watched it hover, completely motionless and silent. I stayed glued to the camera feed for what felt like hours, checking other cameras around the plant. Nothing seemed out of place. When I tried calling the main office, no one answered. The on-call supervisor wasn't picking up either. Around 10 p.m., the light vanished. Not gradually or with any warning, it simply disappeared, as if someone had flipped a switch. The camera returned to normal, showing just the dark sky and empty water tower. I continued monitoring the feed for another hour, but nothing else happened. The next day, everything changed. When I went to review the footage, the entire night's recording was gone. Not just the segment with the light, but the whole night's files, blank and corrupted. No one could explain it. I brought this to Bill, the plant manager, who dismissed it as a potential tech glitch. But I knew something was wrong. This camera had never failed before, and no other cameras lost their recordings. I started asking around town. No one reported seeing anything unusual that night. No lights, no sounds, no aircraft. It was like the incident existed only for me, and even that evidence had been erased. Weeks later, another security guard mentioned hearing from a sheriff's contact that local officials had quietly requested the company stop discussing the incident. After that, camera systems got upgraded, restrictions increased, and people stopped talking about it. I still think about that night sometimes. The way the light just hung there, completely unnatural and silent. How the footage disappeared like it never existed. I never saw anything like it again. And while I can't explain what happened, It taught me that some things resist being documented or remembered. The night was quiet in the national forest, with that sharp, almost brittle cold that signals fall's arrival. Early October meant winter was still distant, and the moon hid behind thin clouds, casting the forest in deeper darkness. After 6 years as a park ranger, I was used to these nighttime shifts, the rustling leaves, distant owl hoots, and occasional branch snaps from wandering wildlife. Something felt different this time. Walking a narrow dirt trail near an old fire lookout, I paused to check my radio when a sound stopped me cold. It wasn't a gunshot or breaking branch, but something like a close thunderclap, sharp and wrong. The sound echoed, and then everything went silent. Completely silent. No birds, no insects, nothing. I froze, straining to listen. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Looking up, I saw something above the tree line, about 50 feet high. It was there for just a moment, a metallic shape unlike anything I'd seen before. Clean edges, smooth surfaces caught the minimal moonlight, reflecting in sharp lines. Not round or oval, but almost flat, hovering horizontally. Its movement defied explanation, not falling or gliding, but simply appearing, hanging briefly, then vanishing straight upward. No sound, no engines, no rotor blades. As quickly as the silence descended, it lifted. Birds chirped, a squirrel chattered nearby. It was like a heavy curtain had been suddenly pulled away. My heart raced, but I didn't run. I stood there, trying to process what I'd witnessed. When I pulled out my radio to call dispatch, I found nothing. No static, no signal, just dead silence. I tried again, no response. With the ranger station 3 miles away, I decided to head back, constantly looking over my shoulder. The trail remained empty. The forest looked exactly the same as always. I was driving through Red Rock Canyon on a Tuesday evening just past sunset, taking the scenic route home from a work trip in Vegas. The sky still held on to some light, but shadows stretched long and dark as the temperature dropped quickly. I've never been a fan of the freeway, preferring these narrow, winding canyon roads flanked by steep sandstone cliffs. At this time of year, there's barely anyone else out there, just me and the road. Around 7:30, something caught my eye. A black sedan with no plates parked just past a sharp bend. Not exactly a common sight in the middle of nowhere. I slowed down, half expecting a roadblock or construction, but saw nothing official. Then 2 guys stepped out, both in black suits and dark sunglasses, despite the low sun. One was tall, maybe early 40s, the other shorter and in his late 30s. They walked straight to my window like they'd been waiting. The tall one didn't smile, just stated, "Road ahead is closed for maintenance. You'll have to turn back." I blinked and glanced up the road. Nothing unusual. No workers, no barriers, no equipment. When I mentioned I didn't see any signs, the shorter guy said it was a private job with no exceptions. I tried to explain I needed to get home, but the tall guy was firm. "We can't let you through. It's not safe." I looked up the road again. The canyon was empty. No lights, no sounds, just quiet rocks and a fading sky. Days later, I found myself constantly watching the treetops whenever I was outside, scanning the sky for some explanation. I talked to the other rangers, but nobody else had heard anything unusual that night. The radio channels worked fine for everyone else. Sometimes I think about how quiet everything got after that moment. It was like the forest itself was waiting for something, then let out a breath when whatever it was disappeared. I can't explain what happened. I just know it wasn't anything I've ever seen or heard of in all my time out here. Back at the station, I checked the security cameras mounted outside. Nothing unusual. No lights, no shapes, no flashes. The forest looked perfectly normal. The road was empty as I drove, my hands tight on the steering wheel. 2 men had just appeared out of nowhere, blocking my path. A black sedan with no markings, no windows, completely unmarked. When I asked about maintenance, the shorter man simply said, "Indefinite." The tall one told me to turn around. As I backed up slowly, I kept checking my rearview mirror. By the time I looked back, both men were already in their car. But when I shifted gears and glanced over my shoulder, the sedan had vanished. No engine sound, no lights, nothing. Just empty road and canyon walls, no trace they'd ever been there. Confused, I crept forward, scanning for barriers or equipment. Nothing unusual. I pulled over, stepped out into the quiet canyon. Dry brush rustled in the wind. My phone showed no signal. I walked up and down the road, searching for any tracks or explanation. Nothing. Back in my car, I started driving home. The sky darkened to deep blue, first stars emerging. About 10 minutes into the drive, a strange light caught my eye. A soft, steady glow just above the canyon rim. Not a plane or helicopter, it moved differently, almost like a lantern suspended in the sky. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, but it remained. At the canyon entrance's small diner, only the night cook Sam was there. I shared my story, expecting him to laugh. Instead, he nodded slowly. "You're not the first," he said. When I asked what he meant, he shrugged. Lights, figures, roads that vanish. Apparently, this wasn't uncommon. I left with an uneasy feeling, watching my mirrors the entire drive home, half expecting to see the black sedan or those two men again. But the road stayed empty. Tyler and I had been running a small YouTube channel documenting weird sightings around upstate New York. It wasn't a professional gig, just a hobby we pursued alongside our day jobs in Albany. We'd drive out to locations people emailed us about, take photos, shoot some B-roll, and upload the content online. This particular weekend, we were investigating a spot near Midburg. An older guy named Len had contacted us about something strange he'd witnessed. Around 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, he claimed to have seen 3 white lights descending below the treetops. No noise, no wind. The next day, he'd found a perfectly round 20-foot ring in the moss. His photos showed something unusual. The ground looked flat and dry, as if something had pressed it down. Saturday afternoon, we drove out and parked on a dirt shoulder. We hiked in with cameras and Tyler's cheap EMF meter, which he always brought for fun. After about 40 minutes, we reached the clearing. The ring was still visible, though not as sharp as in Len's photos. You could tell something had disturbed the area. The ground was compacted, and the moss around the edge had a different color. We spent a couple hours documenting the site. We took drone footage and collected soil samples. At one point, Tyler mentioned feeling a vibration through his boots, but I didn't sense anything. The woods were unusually still. No birds, no bugs, just the occasional creak of trees. As dusk approached, we packed up and headed back to the car. The drive home was uneventful. Over the next few days, I kept checking for any additional information. I shared the story with a few friends who joked about government agents or aliens. A couple days later, I found a small blank piece of paper folded under my windshield wiper. I tucked it away on the dashboard and haven't touched it since. That night, I went to bed thinking about the men, the empty road, and the strange light. When I got home, I'd checked the news and county road updates, but found nothing about closures or maintenance, just the usual warnings about loose rocks and narrow lanes. We stopped for burgers on the way back, laughing about Len and his potential kiddie pool scare. It was just past 10 when we returned to our apartment on Western Avenue, a second-floor unit in a 3-story walk-up that Tyler and I had shared for 3 years. The moment we reached our door, something felt wrong. The handle wasn't fully latched and nudged open easily. Tyler always double-checked locks, so this wasn't normal. We entered cautiously, half expecting a break-in, but nothing seemed stolen. Laptops remained on the desk, the TV was untouched, drawers undisturbed. Yet something was profoundly strange. Every mirror in the apartment had been flipped. The bathroom mirror faced the wall. My bedroom's full-length mirror was turned around. Tyler's dresser mirror lay face down on the carpet. No broken glass, no other disturbances. Windows were still locked from the inside. We didn't call the police, maybe because nothing was technically missing. That single detail about the mirrors haunted us. The night grew tense. Tyler stayed in the living room with lights blazing. I lay in bed, scanning the ceiling. Each time I closed my eyes, I sensed someone watching from just beyond my peripheral vision. No sound, no movement. Around 3 a.m., I got water and found Tyler already stationed by the window, peering through the blinds. "There's someone down there," he said flatly. I joined him. Beneath the sodium street lamp, a man in a black suit stood motionless. No coat, no umbrella, despite the drizzle. Pale skin, no hat. His arms hung rigidly at his sides, staring directly up at our window. Tyler had noticed him 30 minutes earlier. We watched for 10 more minutes. He never moved, never looked away. I tried photographing him, but the image showed only an empty street. Tyler wanted to confront the man. I disagreed. We waited. Sometime after 4, he simply walked away. Not toward a car, not into a building, just vanished. That afternoon, we tried logging into the channel to review the footage from the woods. The drone clips were there, along with the photos and soil sample materials. But Tyler's handheld files, the ones where he'd walked through the ring and talked about the soil, had vanished. Not corrupted or mislabeled, just completely gone. We checked the SD card on my laptop and his, with the same result. No files past a certain timestamp, right around the time we noticed the weird quiet in the clearing. That night, just before bed, I looked out the window again. No one was on the street, but one of the street lamps directly across from our building kept flickering on, off, back on, like someone was playing with the power. I watched it for a while, then closed the blinds. The next morning, neither of us mentioned it. We just made coffee and went about our day like normal. But that wasn't the last time I saw the man, and he had disappeared around the corner. No rush in his step. The following day, we both called out of work. I checked the locks again. Nothing was broken. We talked about what to do next. Report it, ignore it, maybe move. Neither of us really believed we were in danger, but we also couldn't explain what was happening. I was hiking alone one Saturday afternoon in the Bitterroot National Forest out in Montana. It was early October, just when the leaves were starting to turn and the air had that crisp edge to it. Not cold, but cool enough that you knew winter wasn't far off. I had picked a less popular trail, one I hadn't been on before, hoping for some quiet and maybe some good photos of the changing trees. The day was mostly normal. The usual sounds of birds, rustling leaves, distant streams. But about halfway through the hike, as I crossed a small ridge and started down into a hollow, everything changed. The forest just went silent. I don't mean it was quiet in the normal sense. It was more like someone hit a mute button. No birds, no wind in the trees, no rustle of animals moving through the brush. Even the distant sound of a stream seemed gone. I stopped walking, stood still, and looked around. The air was still, almost too still. It felt unnatural. I shrugged it off, figuring it was some weird pocket where the wind didn't reach, or maybe a rare moment with no birds. But the silence pressed in on me. The forest felt heavy, like something was holding its breath. In a clearing ahead, I spotted what initially looked like a black tarp or piece of equipment. Drawing closer, I realized it was a helicopter. Matte black, unmarked, hovering silently about 20 feet above the ground with blades spinning slowly. Beneath the aircraft stood 3 figures in a tight, motionless line. They wore black uniforms, but no details were visible. Just dark, statue-like shapes that didn't move an inch. My brain screamed to turn back, but my body remained frozen. Hands trembling, I raised my camera and snapped a few pictures. After a minute, the helicopter glided almost silently over the treetops and vanished. The figures disappeared just as quickly, leaving no trace behind. A strange chill ran through me despite the warm air. I hurried back to the trailhead, heart racing. The following week seemed normal until my Monday morning commute. About 10 minutes into my 25-minute drive through back roads, I noticed a black SUV trailing me. Tinted windows, no visible plates. I tried taking different turns to shake it off, but the vehicle stayed close. At a red light, the passenger window rolled down. A man leaned out and spoke in a low, unsettling tone. "Forests don't like company." His calm voice sent a deeper chill through me than the words themselves. I remained, Ned silent as the light turned green. The SUV followed for miles before disappearing. The mysterious phrase echoed in my mind. Was it a warning? A threat? I tried to rationalize it as a strange joke, but something felt off. Something didn't feel right. I was driving back from a week-long trip through the Mojave Desert, trying to clear my head. My name's Eric and I work in software support, which means sitting behind a screen all day. I usually need to get outside now and then. This trip was mostly just me, my old Jeep, and a map. No real plan. Just driving through empty places, staying off the main highways as much as I could. On the last night, I was somewhere near Baker, California, coming back toward the 15. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, and the sky was that deep blue you only get in the desert at dusk. The air had cooled down, but the heat from the day still hung close to the ground. The roads were nearly empty, just me and the headlights cutting through the dark. About 40 miles outside Baker, I noticed a car behind me. It was a black sedan, something pretty standard looking, no logos or anything. I glanced in the rearview mirror and caught a glimpse of the driver's face once, just a blurry shape like a man, but I couldn't make out features. I figured maybe it was coincidence, just someone driving the same way, but I kept getting this uneasy feeling. I sped up, thinking maybe I was imagining things, or maybe they'd just pass me, but the car stayed right there, matching my speed perfectly. I slowed down, then sped up again. Still there. I tried to shake it off, thinking maybe they were lost or something, but the more I tried to lose them, the closer they seemed. I turned off the highway onto a smaller road leading to a gas station, thinking I'd wait and see if they pulled in too. Some random line stuck with me. Over the next few days, I kept an eye out for the SUV, but it never showed again. Still, I felt like I was being watched. My phone battery started dying faster than usual, and sometimes I'd catch flickers of movement in the corners of my eyes, shadows that vanished when I looked directly. I thought maybe I was just stressed or tired, but the memory of that silent clearing in the helicopter stayed with me, and the three figures standing so still, like they belonged to some other world I wasn't meant to see. I never went back to that part of the forest. I don't know if I'll ever figure out what was really happening that day, but sometimes when the wind is low and the trees stand quiet, I still feel like those black shapes are watching from somewhere out there. I was chasing a storm out in the Oklahoma plains late in April, the kind that either breaks or makes you if you're into this sort of thing. I've been doing this for years, mostly freelance now, picking up gigs for local news and weather sites. Nothing fancy, just me, my truck, and a camera. That afternoon, the sky was this insane mix of dark gray and green, the kind that makes you feel like the air itself is charged. I was following a funnel cloud northwest of Tulsa, just off some empty back roads. The wind was howling, dust whipping around, and the storm was building fast. I pulled over on a gravel shoulder and set up my camera. A black sedan stopped about 20 yards behind me, engine idling. I got out and started filling my tank, keeping an eye on the car. The driver stayed still, watching me. When I finished, I climbed back into my Jeep and thought about just driving off, but something held me there. I wasn't sure what, but it was like I couldn't just leave. So I waited. After a minute or two, the passenger window on the black sedan rolled down slowly, making a quiet hiss in the otherwise silent night. A man's face appeared in the window, maybe mid-40s, clean-shaven, wearing a black suit and a dark shirt. His eyes were calm but sharp, and he didn't smile. "You saw something you shouldn't," he said, voice low but clear. I blinked, surprised. "I don't know what you mean. Drive carefully from now on," he said. Then the window rolled up and the car pulled away, disappearing into the dark like it had just melted into the night. I sat there, heart pounding, trying to make sense of what just happened. I hadn't seen anything out of the ordinary during my trip, or at least nothing I'd admit to seeing. But that look in his eyes and the way he spoke left no doubt he was serious. I didn't follow him or try to chase. I just started my Jeep and drove home, looking over my shoulder the whole way. I don't know if it was a warning or a threat, but ever since then, I've been more aware of the quiet things. The shadows moving just out of sight, the distant humming in the desert night. I don't tell people about it much. It feels like one of those things you keep to yourself because no one really believes you, or if they do, they look at you differently. But sometimes late at night, I swear I see headlights far off on the horizon, and I wonder if that black sedan is still out there somewhere watching. I was out storm chasing, camera mounted on my tripod, filming a tornado as it ripped across the flat landscape. The usual signs were there: swirling dust, distant lightning, clouds twisting and shifting. But something caught my eye that wasn't part of the typical scene. Just above the funnel's tip, a faint shimmer appeared, like a heat haze or reflection. Zooming in, I realized this wasn't debris. It was a smooth, precise metallic object, oval-shaped and about the size of a small car. The thing hovered deliberately, not spinning or tumbling, just hanging there as if watching the storm. My heart raced as I kept filming. The wind intensified, and rain began to spit. For maybe 2 minutes, this strange object lingered near the tornado's edge before fading into the clouds as the funnel shifted direction. I packed up quickly and headed back to town, my mind racing. That night, I uploaded the footage to YouTube and shared it on storm chasing forums. By morning, the video had gone viral, with tens of thousands of views and endless speculation. Some thought it was a drone, others a light trick or reflection. The next day, things got weird. A call came on my cell from an unknown number. The caller claimed to be an insurance agent, asking about wind damage to my brain. Their tone was clinical, almost robotic, like they were reading from a prepared script. They mentioned checking for cognitive impairments from high-risk weather events. When I asked for more details, the line went silent. Then the caller hung up. I tried to call back, but the number was disconnected. Then, mysteriously, the footage disappeared completely. My storm-chasing days were different after that night. Back in late October 2019, I was working the swinging shift at Epley Airfield in Omaha, handling radar operations for over 6 years. The night was cold but clear, with just a few high clouds drifting from the west. Traffic was light, a couple commercial arrivals, a FedEx departure, and some private jets from Council Bluffs. I was alone on radar duty, which wasn't unusual for our small operation. Lynn, my coworker, was walking the outer perimeter fence doing routine checks while I watched the scopes and sipped some terrible coffee. Around 8:40 p.m., something caught my attention. A quick ping just west of the Missouri River near Elkhorn. It was barely a blip on the screen. One sweep, altitude unknown, then vanished on the next pass. Initially, I thought it might be a reflection, something that happens with weather anomalies or terrain features. But then it appeared again, slightly north this time. 2 sweeps, then silence. I logged the contact as unknown with an inactive transponder. Weeks later, strange pings started happening. My YouTube channel still hosted the video, but the footage itself disappeared without explanation or takedown notice. When I tried uploading my backup, it wouldn't process. Forum discussions revealed others who had saved or shared the video had also lost their copies. Files corrupted or mysteriously deleted. Odd occurrences became more frequent. My phone would beep randomly with no notifications. Looking skyward, I'd catch fleeting reflections or quick cloud flashes. Nothing definitive, just glimpses of something trying to stay hidden. One night, driving home from a diner, my radio went completely silent for 5 full minutes. No static, no sound, despite the engine running normally. A next-day car check revealed no issues. I waited for official contact, maybe requesting the footage or an interview. Nothing came. Months passed. I still chase storms, but now I'm cautious, avoiding funnels and anything too close. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined it all. The metallic shape, the call, the vanishing video. But the memory of that shimmer above the funnel cloud remains burned in my mind. I can't explain what I saw, but I know it wasn't part of any storm I'd ever encountered before. The radar screen was acting strange that night. A blip appeared without altitude, visual tracking intermittently breaking up. Standard protocols seemed useless. About 4 minutes later, it showed again, this time east of the river, just outside Omaha's Class C boundary. The travel speed was incredibly fast, fighter jet fast, and still no transponder code. I tried calling out on the emergency frequency, 121.5, hoping for a response. Unknown aircraft, Omaha approach radar, no reply came back. Checking the weather radar overlay revealed clean, dry air with no storm cells or returns. Then things got truly odd. Between 8:50 and 9:07, this unidentified object appeared 7 different times on my scope, never staying in one location. It jumped north of the airport, then south, then out toward Bellevue. Sometimes over the river, each appearance lasted just a second or two before vanishing. The movement defied logic, covering over 20 miles in under 10 seconds, with 0 altitude data, no identification, no squawk code. I started screen recording, which isn't strictly allowed, but happens when something unusual occurs. Around 9:10, I contacted the supervisor desk. Daryl, an older ex-Air Force guy, was on duty. I explained the intermittent, unidentifiable radar contact moving erratically. His response was a long pause, followed by, "How long you been watching it?" When I said about 30 minutes, he simply replied, "Okay, keep logging, no further action." I suggested notifying the Air Force Base, but he dismissed the idea. "Nope. They'll see it if they need to." Something about his response felt rehearsed, like he'd said these exact words before. After 9:12, the object disappeared completely. For nearly an hour, nothing else showed on the scope. I ran system diagnostics and checked antenna status. Everything checked out green. Later, around 10:30, I told Lynn about the incident when she returned from her walk. Her reaction was subdued. "Was it the river again?" she asked. When I explained its erratic movement, she grew quiet. "We get stuff like that maybe once or twice a year," she finally said. "They tell us not to chase it." When I pressed her about who they were, she just shrugged. Supervisors, FAA personnel, sometimes military. The details didn't seem to matter to her. I finished my shift at midnight and loaded the screen recording onto a USB when I got home. The recording was 24 minutes long, but most of it was just dead air. Only 6 or 7 brief moments showed anything unusual. Those moments played over and over in my mind. The track lines looked jagged and inconsistent, almost as if the object was skipping across the screen. Our radar system isn't designed to track fast-moving targets at such angles, but even accounting for that, what I saw shouldn't have been possible. At one point, the object jumped from over Fort Calhoun to east of Pelion in just 5 seconds, a distance of nearly 30 miles. The next night, something strange happened. My logbook entry from the previous shift had vanished. I always write in blue ink, and the rest of the page was in black, but my entry was simply gone. I asked Daryl about it. He suggested I must have forgotten to write it down. When I insisted I had, he casually remarked that maybe the page got torn. But that wasn't true. The page was completely intact, just my entry was missing. That same night, our radar system rebooted at 2 a.m., which is unusual unless there's a firmware update or a fault. I checked the update log and nothing had been pushed. No new blips, no odd readings. Everything returned to normal. I've watched the screen recording hundreds of times. The blips don't follow any standard flight pattern. They don't curve, they just jump point to point, clean like a stone skipping across water. Whatever it was, it didn't belong in our airspace and didn't behave like anything I've ever tracked. It was early October, midday. I was hiking alone in the Blue Ridge Mountains, taking a week off to clear my head. The weather was cool but sunny, maybe mid-60s. I hadn't told many people about my trip, I just wanted solitude in the woods. I was about 6 miles out from the trailhead on a lesser-used trail near Dotton Park, the kind of trail where you might not see another person all day. At an overlook, I stopped for water and a snack. The trees thinned out, giving a clear view of the next ridge about a mile away. Sitting on a flat rock, looking across the valley, I noticed something shiny hovering just above the tree line. It looked like a piece of chrome, floating perfectly still, not moving or wobbling. I was out hiking, taking a break and looking around, when something caught my eye. A small silver dot hung motionless in the sky, reflecting sunlight like a tilted mirror. It wasn't moving, and it definitely wasn't a drone, too big, too still. I stared at it, losing track of time. When I glanced down to grab a protein bar, it vanished, not moved, just gone. I scanned the ridge and surrounding trees, but found nothing. The silence hit me then. Before, the forest had been alive with bird songs and woodpecker calls, the kind of background noise you usually tune out. Now, everything had stopped. Not scared away, just paused. No rustling, no insects, nothing. I could hear my own blood pulsing in my ears. The woods felt like they were holding their breath. I stood up, turning slowly, trying to listen. Something felt wrong. I wasn't easily spooked, but this silence was different. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I'd imagined the reflection, maybe the birds were just resting. But the feeling persisted. I decided to cut my hike short, taking a connector trail back toward the trailhead instead of my planned longer route. About an hour later, I stopped at a narrow switchback with a view of the ridge where I'd seen the strange object. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just catching my breath. Then I heard it. A faint hum like distant power lines, except there were no power lines, no buildings, no roads, just woods. It wasn't loud or constant, more like a pressure behind my ears that pulsed every few seconds, deeper than tinnitus. I held my breath to check if it was coming from me, but the sound remained unchanged. I scanned the sky again. Nothing. no planes, no contrails. I was camped out in the Nevada desert just south of Bay, near an old gravel road that branches into the hills. This spot was familiar to me. I'd been out here several times before, drawn by the incredible silence. It's one of the rare places where you can sit outside at night and hear absolutely nothing, not even a whisper of wind when the air is completely still. Late April brought cool nights, but not freezing, and the sky was a perfect, unbroken canvas of clarity. I arrived around 6 p.m. and set up a simple camp in a small flat area nestled between low rock formations. My setup was minimal: a 2-person tent, sleeping bag, and a cooler tucked in my pack. I skipped building a fire to avoid drawing attention, knowing my jet boil would handle any cooking needs. Hours passed and something felt off. I realized I hadn't heard a single bird since leaving an earlier overlook, not even crows, which were usually everywhere out here. The silence was unsettling. I started moving more quickly along the trail, which was narrow and overgrown in spots. I almost missed a turnoff where the sign had fallen down. Doubling back cost me about 15 minutes. A constant hum followed me, pressing against the back of my skull like a persistent headache. Near the parking lot, I encountered a couple hiking in the opposite direction, the first people I'd seen all day. They looked like experienced hikers, fully equipped with packs and trekking poles. We exchanged brief hellos. I wanted to ask if they'd noticed anything strange, but decided against it, eager to return to my car. As I approached the trailhead, the hum mysteriously faded away. No sudden stop, just a gradual disappearance. Suddenly, the woods seemed to come back to life. A cardinal chirped somewhere to my left, and a squirrel darted across the path. The parking lot contained only 2 vehicles, my car and an old Subaru, likely belonging to the hiking couple. I stood beside my car, trying to calm my racing heart. Though I hadn't run, I felt inexplicably wired. My shirt was damp with sweat, despite the cool air. During the drive back to my rented cabin, my mind kept returning to that strange object, unnaturally shiny, unlike a plane or balloon, more like polished glass or chrome, something that simply didn't belong. I didn't share the experience with anyone, not wanting to seem dramatic. Maybe it was a drone, maybe the silence was just a coincidence. Maybe I'd imagined the entire thing. But I've hiked that trail 5 or 6 times since, and I've never encountered that same eerie quiet again. Not once. I woke up suddenly, that kind of sharp awakening where silence feels heavy and something seems off before you're even fully conscious. My phone showed 4:13 a.m., battery still good. I opened my GPS app, a habit when I'm solo hiking, and something immediately felt strange. The coordinates didn't match where I'd set up camp. According to the screen, I was roughly 2 miles northeast of my parking spot. At first, I thought maybe I'd marked the original location incorrectly. I closed and reopened the app, same result. My offline map still showed my previous saved pins, including the one from that night. Everything around me looked exactly the same. The tent hadn't moved. My boots sat right where I'd left them outside the flap. I unzipped the tent and looked around. Same rocks, same flat stretch, same little Joshua tree with my reflective marker. I checked the soft, dusty ground for tracks. Nothing but my own steps from the previous day. No drag marks, no tire treads, no animal prints. Barefoot, I stepped outside and did a slow circle with my flashlight. The air was completely still. Stars hung low, slightly shifted toward dawn, but otherwise unchanged. I walked a few yards out, searching for any sign of disturbance. Nothing seemed different. I pulled on my boots and checked the GPS again. The dot remained 2 miles northeast of my original pin. I tried using the compass to retrace my route from the truck, but I knew with certainty I'd approached from the west, slightly northwest. Something wasn't adding up. The night before had been typical. A short ridge hike at sunset, a quick meal of granola and jerky, then into my sleeping bag around 10. I'd slept deeply, unusually so for desert camping, where the cold and rocky ground usually interrupts sleep. No dreams, just complete blackness. Now, everything felt surreal. How could my location have changed without any trace of movement? I was out in the backyard last March around 2:30 in the morning, testing my new astronomy gear. Living on the outskirts of Missoula, about 15 minutes west of town, the light pollution isn't too bad after midnight. I just upgraded my ASI camera and was using my Skywatcher mount for some test shots. Something strange happened that night. When I woke up, I realized I wasn't where I'd originally set up camp. My tent had somehow moved to a completely different location. The landscape around me looked similar, but not quite right. Landmarks I expected to see were missing or positioned differently. The night before had been eerily silent. No crickets, no wind, not even the distant highway hum that usually fills the background. Then I heard a faint, pulsing sound from overhead, soft and hard to pinpoint. I turned off my flashlight and scanned the sky, but saw nothing except stars. The mysterious hum seemed to slip away rather than fade, in a way that's difficult to describe. I kept checking my GPS, which showed I was in a different spot. When morning came and the sky lightened, I climbed a nearby ridge to get my bearings. From there, I could see my truck parked exactly where I'd left it, but I was far from where I thought I should be. It took me nearly 2 hours to navigate back to the road, following my GPS manually. Once home, I double-checked the coordinates on a full map. The distance between my original campsite and where I woke up couldn't be explained by simple wandering. There were no trails or service roads between the 2 points, just open desert. I don't camp in that area anymore. Nothing specifically threatened me, and I wasn't chased away. But something about that night felt wrong, like I was somewhere I shouldn't have been. Or maybe worse, somewhere I was meant to be. That night, I was near Ursa Major, aiming my telescope at M109. The observing conditions seemed decent. No moon, minimal haze, just a light breeze. I was mostly adjusting focus and dithering settings while my auto-guiding held steady and the camera feed looked clean. Around the third frame, something caught my eye flickering across the lower right corner of the preview window. At first, I thought it might be a satellite. They often create diagonal streaks across frames. Just a quick blip, like a hot pixel that moved. Nothing seemed unusual. But then it happened again about 10 seconds later, from a slightly different angle. I paused the sequence and rewound the buffer. There it was, a faint point of light, roughly as bright as a 6th magnitude star, moving across the field of view. This wasn't a typical satellite trajectory. Instead of moving straight, it curved, starting from the lower edge, rising at a 30 degrees angle, then bending right almost like a hook. It slowed near the top of the frame before vanishing completely. No fade, no trailing streak, just gone. Initially, I considered a tumbling satellite might explain this. Sometimes they flare or flash depending on sunlight. But this was different. It didn't flash or rotate. It changed direction. I switched to manual tracking, trying to reacquire it visually, but found nothing. Checking heavens above on my phone revealed no matching satellite passes. The ISS wasn't scheduled, and no known LEO satellites were near that sky section at that time. I looked up with my naked eyes. Nothing. No planes, no contrails, not even a blinking dot. The wind had died completely. An odd stillness settled around me. My neighbor's horses weren't moving. The trees remained absolutely silent. I zoomed into the footage and studied the frames carefully. The object appeared in just 5 frames, maintaining consistent brightness, no flicker, no distortion. The movement itself was the truly strange part, rising upright in one frame, then stalling in the next. I was out stargazing that night, coffee in hand, when something bizarre caught my eye. At around 5, an object zipped left like a slingshot in reverse and vanished. This wasn't a normal movement. Satellites can't do that. Planes can't do that. Nothing I know moves like this without turning or showing some sign of propulsion. I saved the clip and backed it up, sitting there with my coffee growing cold while trying to process what I'd seen. Then, around 3:10 a.m., another strange occurrence. The telescope's scope started slowing slightly. Not dramatically, but noticeably off by a few arc minutes per second. The hand controller sat on the ground next to the tripod, untouched. Somehow, the mount was adjusting itself without any input. I stopped tracking and reset everything, attempting a go-to command to Vega. Initially, it moved normally, then stalled halfway. No error messages, no beeps, it just froze. After powering the mount off and on, it rebooted fine with no obvious issues. But something felt off, like something had interfered with the equipment. This was unprecedented. I'm meticulous about firmware updates, and the rig had never glitched before. The atmosphere felt strange that night. Not cold, but flat, as if the sky had lost its depth. I know it sounds odd, but that's the best way I can describe it. I packed up earlier than usual, unsettled. The next day I examined the footage on my desktop, stabilizing and enhancing it. Each time the result was the same, a small, steady point of light performing an impossible directional change. I posted on a local astronomy forum, hoping someone else might have witnessed something similar. Strangely, no replies came, not even views, unusual for such an active board. I showed the clip to my friend Doug, a retired Air Force mechanic who does imaging. He studied it intently, then leaned back and declared, "That's not a bird, not a drone, and not one of ours," offering no further explanation. About a month later, another peculiar incident occurred. Just after 1 a.m., I was in the garage working on my truck. The telescope was folded in the corner, mount still plugged in from the previous night. As I tightened the belt tensioner, the mount suddenly powered on by itself. Though the garage was dark, I could see the green glow from the controller. Night had settled in, and my scope was acting strange. Dust swirled around the cover as it began moving slowly, almost imperceptibly. Locked in place, it couldn't travel far, but the motors hummed with an unsettling energy. I walked over and switched it off. Sleep eluded me that night. Since then, nothing unusual has caught my attention. I still take the scope out on clear nights, but now I'm cautious. The mount stays unplugged, and I've abandoned auto-guiding for manual control. While setting up shots or checking the histogram, I'll pause and look skyward with just my eyes. Stars fill the darkness, yet occasionally a feeling creeps in. Something's watching. One of those pinpricks of light seems different, waiting to move again. I was midway through private pilot training when it happened. My name's Ryan, and I was flying a standard Cessna 172 from a small airport near Cedar Rapids, Iowa. By then, I'd completed several solo flights, mostly in good weather, learning plane handling and radio communication. The day started typically. Blue skies stretched overhead, visibility was excellent, and a light southeast breeze whispered across the landscape. My route was straightforward. Head north for about 40 miles, circle of Wiscall, Malltown, then return. My instructor had planned a simple navigation exercise, and confidence filled me. Cruising at 3,000 feet, about 20 minutes into the flight, the tower's voice crackled through the radio. Cessna N-1245, radar contact. Turn left heading 330 to avoid restricted airspace. Maintain altitude. I acknowledged and began a gentle left turn. But something felt off. The windshield revealed only open sky, no clouds, no aircraft, no landmarks, just an endless blue canvas. Initially, I assumed the restricted airspace might be at a different altitude or just out of sight. I continued my smooth turn, scanning the surroundings. The horizon looked normal. Far below, green fields, roads, and rivers painted the landscape. Yet no explanation for the warning emerged. I attempted to contact the tower again, but only static answered. Switching frequencies, adjusting volume, nothing worked. Just harsh white noise filled my headset. The sky stretched endlessly around me, a vast blue canvas with something subtly wrong. My plane cruised steadily at 3,000 feet and 90 knots, but something felt off. I'd been trying to reach Cedar Rapids Tower for what seemed like an eternity. My calls met only with static. When I glanced down at the GPS, the landscape below looked strange. Roads didn't match my previous routes, and entire rivers had vanished. The map seemed to be glitching, flickering between what I knew and something unfamiliar. Out the window, the horizon shimmered weirdly. Not cloudy, but distorted like a heat haze, colors muted through a faded lens. My heart raced a little faster. I was alone up here, with no ground chatter on any frequency. I scanned for the restricted airspace boundaries, seeing nothing but that endless blue surrounding me. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe some equipment was down, or the tower was handling other traffic. Then suddenly, a distant voice crackled through the radio. It wasn't the usual clear tower communication, but sounded underwater, far away. Cessna N-12345, you are clear to resume course. Proceed as planned. Relieved, I acknowledged the instruction. As I turned back to my original heading, something extraordinary happened. The weird haze dissolved. The landscape below snapped back into focus. Roads realigned, rivers reappeared, colors brightening. Normal radio chatter returned, with the tower providing routine updates. But something lingered. Those few minutes felt like I'd slipped into another reality, a brief, unsettling transition between worlds. I landed without incident, but couldn't shake the feeling that something unusual had occurred. A strange silence hung over the yard that morning. I woke just after 5 when my older dog started whining, unusual for her, since she typically sleeps quietly at the foot of the bed. Thinking she needed to go out, I slid open the back door without much thought. She stopped dead in her tracks, refusing to move. Something felt off. A faint, sharp smell like burnt plastic or electrical wiring hung in the air, but I couldn't pinpoint its source. When I stepped onto the porch barefoot, I noticed an odd sight. Pitch black dust covering a perfect 10-foot circle in the center of the yard. This wasn't ordinary dirt or ash. It looked like someone had meticulously sprinkled charcoal powder across the ground. Lighter streaks extended closer to the house, with faint smudges on the porch steps, as if someone with sooty shoes had walked up and vanished. When I touched the powder, it was dry and fine, clinging to my fingers without any grit or moisture. The sky was overcast and barely light. No movement, no sound. The absolute silence struck me most. No birds chirping in the trees, which was deeply unnatural. My dog, usually brave, had backed away and hidden behind the door frame, something she'd never done before, not even during thunderstorms. I stood here trying to make sense of it. In these suburban surroundings, there were no factories, no construction crews, nothing that could explain this bizarre scene. The experience reminded me of a similar moment during a flight years ago, a brief, inexplicable encounter that left me wondering about things just beyond our perception. Sometimes I look at the sky and think about those moments when reality seems to slip, just for an instant, revealing something usually hidden from view. Early morning, around 6, I grabbed my phone and snapped a few pictures. The dust was tricky to capture, but by angling the camera just right, I could make out its contrast against the grass. I sent a photo to Jenna, who works mornings, hoping she might recognize what I was seeing. Something about this material felt off. If it had been from a fire, I'd expect ash flakes or a distinct smell. But this was different, too fine and uniform, as if someone had deliberately laid it down. The consistency was unusual. Waiting for Jenna's response, I made coffee and periodically checked through the blinds. By 8:30, something bizarre happened. The yard was completely clean. No black powder, no smudges on the porch, and the grass looked perfectly normal. No dead patches, no burn marks, not even a lingering scent. When I went outside and stood in the same spot, everything looked like plain grass. The porch steps particularly puzzled me. Earlier I'd noticed smudges I planned to wipe down, but now they had vanished without a trace. My dog's behavior was strange. She refused to step outside, wouldn't touch her ball or leash, and kept pacing while sniffing the air. Her outside water bowl remained untouched. For a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined the whole thing, but the phone pictures remained. One even showed a clear boot print in the dust, my own from earlier. Yet when I stood in the same spot and compared, the ground looked unchanged. It was as if someone had meticulously cleaned every inch with tweezers. Unable to sleep, I spent the morning researching. Volcanic ash fallout seemed closest, but we weren't near any volcanic activity. Other theories like mildew, mold, or pollution didn't match what I'd seen, and none explained the material's sudden disappearance. Around 11, Jenna finally responded. She suggested a busted transformer or exploded firework, mentioning a similar incident during a storm. But we hadn't experienced any storms, and I hadn't heard any loud noises. Plus, our power remained uninterrupted. All clocks were functioning normally. The mystery remained unsolved. That night, the neighborhood was eerily quiet. I sat on the steps with the porch light off, feeling a strange sense of anticipation. A couple of cars passed in the distance, and wind chimes softly rang a few houses down. But my yard remained completely motionless. No wind, no bugs, no movement. Even the trees stood perfectly still. A plane blinked slowly across the sky, and for some reason, I wondered if it was connected to what had happened. I couldn't explain why, but the feeling lingered, like a connection just out of reach. A little after 10, a brief flicker of light caught my eye over the fence. It was like someone flashing a small mirror from far away. I stood up, thinking it might be a flashlight or someone in the woods, but it didn't reappear. I waited about 15 minutes before going inside. The next morning, the dog barked sharply at the sliding door, not whining, but a real bark. When I checked, nothing was there. The yard looked unchanged, yet she refused to go near the door for the rest of the day. Days later, I showed the pictures to a friend who works in environmental testing. He suggested it might be industrial dust from the highway. I didn't argue, but something felt off. The coverage was too uniform, and how it vanished without wind or rain made no sense. I still walked the yard occasionally, searching for any trace of what happened. The grass remains healthy, no discoloration, no burn marks, no unusual growth or dead spots. But the dog never goes near it anymore. She stays on the patio or does her business out front. I haven't mentioned it to the neighbors. What would I even say? Sometimes I look at the pictures again. They seem blurrier now, the black powder less distinct than I remember. But the boot print remains. Same tread pattern as my own. Throughout the day, the dog had stayed clean. In the afternoon, she'd only pee at the very edge of the porch on the gravel, avoiding the grass completely. I'd even walked across it barefoot, checking if it felt different. It didn't. Just cool and slightly damp in the shade. Normal. I started jogging in the mornings after moving to Noville, a quiet little town with lots of farmland and minimal traffic. The roads weren't well lit, which was part of its charm. Every morning around 5:15 a.m., just before dawn, I'd run the loop near Bristow Road. The early hours were peaceful. Frogs, crickets, and birds my only companions. Occasionally, a pickup truck would pass, heading to work. This was a late October Tuesday, with weather that had cooled but wasn't cold enough for gloves. I wore my bright orange windbreaker, more for visibility than warmth, though hardly anyone drove this route. The moon was about half full, and the sky was transitioning from black to blue. It was beautiful, the kind of morning an artist might want to capture if they had the patience. Just past the Martin Place, with its old two-story building and rusted tractor, I noticed something unusual. Lights hovered above the tree line to my right, where dense woods of tall pines and oaks stretched uninterrupted. What struck me was their precise arrangement, 5 or 6 white lights, completely still and evenly spaced. I slowed my pace, initially thinking it might be a low-flying aircraft or hovering helicopter. But something was off. No sound reached me. No engine noise, no blade whirring, not even wind. Their positioning didn't match any standard aircraft formation. Instead, they formed a tilted ring, like a spinning coin frozen mid-flip. Gradually, I realized the lights were moving. They rotated smoothly in a circular motion, unlike any aircraft movement. The entire set of lights turned together, fluid as a hanging mobile. I stopped completely, watching and trying to comprehend what I was seeing. Time seemed to stretch. My body began cooling down, sweat chilling on my skin in the morning breeze. Almost instinctively, I turned to check if anyone else was on the road. I wasn't scared, not yet, just bewildered by what unfolded before me. The first hint something was wrong came with the sudden absence of lights. One moment they were there, and the next, they vanished completely, as if someone had simply switched them off. I tried repositioning myself, thinking maybe they'd shifted behind the trees, but nothing appeared. Silence descended, unlike anything I'd experienced before. No insects, no birds, not even wind rustling branches. My breathing seemed loud in the stillness, and even my footsteps on the gravel felt unnaturally heavy. This stretch of road was usually alive with sounds, but now everything had gone completely quiet. A tight, uneasy feeling crept over me. Not panic, but a sense of being watched. I scanned the tree line, searching for any movement, but saw nothing. My pace quickened slightly, and my footsteps echoed too loudly on the asphalt. For maybe a quarter mile, the silence followed me. I kept looking up, expecting the lights to reappear, but the sky was brightening and nothing emerged. Then, near the cattle gate, something changed. First a few birds, then more, began to chirp, as if someone had unpaused the woods. I finished my run normally, returning home while Nick still slept. I didn't mention it immediately, wanting to convince myself it was just a strange moment. Over the next few mornings, I ran the same route at the same time. Nothing unusual happened. But each time I passed that stretch near Martin Place, I'd slow down and watch the trees. I never saw the lights again, though twice I noticed that same eerie stillness, a moment where everything seemed to stop breathing. This wasn't the first odd experience I'd had. Another night, driving back from Flagstaff to Kingman after my cousin's kid's birthday, something similar occurred. I'd stayed later than planned, helping clean up and chatting with my uncle. Leaving around 11, I took the familiar route along I-40 through the desert, a drive I'd done countless times before. The night was dry and cool, with a moon that wasn't quite full. My truck's dash cam was running, recording what seemed like just another routine trip. I installed the dash cam a few months back after some guy ran a red light and tried to blame me. Now it just runs whenever the ignition's on. The drive was uneventful, quiet and mostly solitary. I passed 2 semis between Seligman and Ashfork, while an old Raymond Chandler novel played and a Gatorade sat in the cup holder. When I got home and parked in the driveway, I killed the engine and gathered my stuff from the passenger seat. As always, I glanced at the dash cam when shutting off the truck. Something was off. The screen was frozen, stuck on a single frame, black road, stars overhead, with a timestamp reading 12:38, 1:11, which didn't match my truck's clock showing 12:40. This bothered me. The camera should sync its time with the GPS, and I just set the clock that morning. I tapped the screen. Nothing changed. I unplugged and replugged it, and it rebooted normally, starting to record again. No visible damage. Inside, I transferred the SD card to my laptop to review the files. They save in 3-minute segments. I found the last complete clip ending at 12:38, followed by a partial file that had frozen. This clip was unusual, only 2 seconds long instead of the typical 3 minutes. Opening the file revealed a normal view: dark highway, center lines, desert brush, stars filling the sky, no other headlights. But the final frame was bizarre. Suddenly, everything went black. Not just the road or the dash cam cutting out, but the sky itself. The stars vanished in an instant. I meticulously checked frame by frame using video software. Every previous frame showed a crystal clear sky with dozens of stars. Then, in that last frame, nothing, no stars. The desert, road, and truck interior remained the same, just starless. The next file started at 12:41, as if 2 minutes had mysteriously disappeared. It continued normally, the same highway stretch, still no other vehicles, stars back in place. I even cross-referenced with the truck's GPS log to confirm. I didn't really know something was off until I looked at the GPS data. During a short stretch of my drive, I'd apparently traveled about 500 feet, but the speed was listed as 0. It was like the GPS had lost signal momentarily and then picked me up slightly ahead, with no record of motion in between. The rest of the drive looked completely normal, with no missing footage or glitches. I rewatched the video repeatedly, searching for anything unusual. I was looking for lights, reflections, weird shadows, anything that might explain the gap. Then I noticed something strange. In the 2 clips before the blackout, there was a shimmer I hadn't seen while driving. Around 12:35, it appeared in the upper right corner of the front camera. The shimmer was small, about the size of my thumb on the screen. It moved like a heat distortion, but it wasn't over the hood or road, it was in the sky. It reminded me of a bug crawling across a dirty windshield. Only this was actually in the sky. Over the next few minutes, it wobbled slightly and moved a few degrees to the left before disappearing. What was really odd was how the stars behind it behaved. When the shimmer passed over them, they seemed to blur, as if something semi-transparent was moving between the camera and the sky. This was around 12:37, and the blackout happened just a minute later at 12:38. I checked the rear camera too. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but then I spotted something. A single frame with a faint, wide arc of light at the top center of the view. It wasn't like any tail or headlights, more of a soft, barely visible smudge that appeared and then vanished instantly. I kept this to myself for a couple of days, unsure how to even describe what I'd seen. Eventually, I showed the footage to my neighbor Danny, who used to work for ADOT and watches a lot of strange sky videos. After watching everything, he just asked me one question. "Did you feel anything when it happened?" "No," I told him. I hadn't noticed anything during the drive. No sounds, no lights, no radio static. My audiobook played continuously. The only evidence something might have happened was on the dash cam. And that's what truly bothered me. There was no clear moment I could point to and say, This is when something strange occurred. We'd been out in the desert that Saturday night seeking peace and a clear view of the stars. Just a couple of amateur astronomy enthusiasts, Laura and I had driven out late, bringing nothing more than folding chairs, blankets, and her small binoculars. Our spot was a dirt pull-off about 20 miles west of Tonopah, Nevada, far enough from town lights to see the Milky Way spread like a pale smear across the sky. The night was dry and cold, but not freezing. You could see your breath, yet the air felt smooth. No clouds hung overhead, and stars twinkled everywhere, like someone had shaken a jar of tiny lights. We'd set up near a rocky ridge where we could lean back without worrying about trees or hills blocking our view. We were quietly talking and pointing out constellations when Laura suddenly went silent, turning her binoculars skyward. I looked up and saw it. A cluster of 6 or 7 lights grouped tightly in the sky. They weren't twinkling like stars, but steady like LEDs, hovering in the exact same spot without drifting or blinking out. I asked her what she thought, but she just shrugged and handed me the binoculars. Through the lenses, the lights were even clearer. They definitely formed a rough shape I couldn't recognize. No blinking airplane lights, no sound. Just this odd, perfectly still grouping. We watched for maybe 10 minutes, neither of us saying much because nothing about it made sense. Later, when I tried to upload the clip to my Cartech forum, something strange happened. The file wouldn't load properly. When I compressed it, the last frame turned into corrupted green static. A screen recorder attempt resulted in that frame being solid black, as if cut. The original still plays fine on my laptop, though. I've saved it to multiple drives and occasionally play it back frame by frame. Nothing new emerges. The stars simply blink out, then return. And I was just driving. I've driven that road at night many times before. I'm familiar with dust storms and weird flashes from testing ranges in the distance. But this was different. Something felt off. One night while driving home from work, something happened that I still can't really explain. We were out in the desert and a cluster of lights caught our attention. Suddenly, one light peeled away from the group and began moving in a wide, smooth arc, at least a quarter mile across. There was no sound, no blinking, just a soft, constant glow that maintained its brightness throughout. The way it moved was unlike anything I'd ever seen. No wings, no fluttering, just this deliberate, almost choreographed motion. After completing its wide loop, the light rejoined the cluster perfectly, like a formation of birds. But these weren't birds. Laura was with me, and we both knew something unusual was happening. We watched in stunned silence as the entire cluster slowly drifted upward, fading into the night sky. Not shooting off or darting away, just climbing until it vanished completely. I remember holding my breath, my mind racing to find any rational explanation, but nothing made sense. The entire event lasted maybe 20 minutes, and then the sky returned to normal, stars twinkling as if nothing had occurred. We packed up and drove back, an uneasy tension hanging between us. The dark, quiet road seemed to press in around us. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights following us, but there was nothing. The next morning, I called the local ranger station to see if anyone else had reported anything strange. The guy on the phone just laughed it off, saying campers always claim to see weird things, but there were no official reports. I searched online later, finding only vague mentions of unusual lights in nearby counties. What made the experience even more bizarre was the complete lack of additional strange occurrences. No weird noises, no phone interference, no feeling of being watched. Just those inexplicable lights moving in a way that defied explanation. It wasn't a plane or a drone, too high, too steady, too strange in how it moved independently and then rejoined the group. It definitely wasn't a meteor or satellite, which move quickly and don't loop around. Every time I think about that night, I'm left with the same haunting question. What were those lights doing out there in the silent desert sky? The night shift at the hospital in Spokane was winding down, and the clock was creeping toward 2 a.m. Empty roads stretched out before me, with a clear, cold, early spring sky overhead. The air felt sharp, yet held a hint of lingering daytime warmth. I'd cracked the car windows slightly to prevent the interior from feeling too stuffy, and the radio hummed softly beneath the engine's steady sound. About 20 minutes into my drive, past the last streetlights where the highway opened into vast fields, something caught my eye. A light in the sky was moving downward, but not like a typical falling star. This wasn't a quick streak across the heavens. Instead, it descended slowly, almost floating. I blinked repeatedly, wondering if city lights were playing tricks on my vision. But no, the light was definitely there, hovering silently a few hundred feet above the ground. It wasn't a harsh spotlight or street lamp glow, but a soft, steady amber light that remained completely motionless. I slowed the car, trying to make out its shape. Too far away to distinguish details, it remained just a bright blur. Then, without warning, it shot straight upward, faster than anything I'd ever seen. Like a silent bullet, it vanished into the dark sky above the tree line. My heart raced, not from fear exactly, but a strange mix of confusion and tension. I checked the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone else who might have witnessed the same thing. Nothing. Just empty road behind me. At home, I told Sarah about the incident. She laughed it off, suggesting it was probably a satellite or drone. But I knew better. Drones don't move like that, not at such height, and certainly not with such absolute silence. In the nights that followed, I found myself scanning the sky during my drives, hoping to see something similar. But everything remained normal. Sparse traffic, typical stars, nothing out of the ordinary. Yet something had fundamentally changed. That night had been different, though I couldn't quite explain why. I was driving west on Highway 95 about 30 miles south of Tonopah, set past midnight. After a late dinner with my cousin in Ellery, I decided to head to Bay for the night. The road stretched out quietly, with no other cars in sight. Only my high beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the cracked black top. This route was familiar to me. I'd driven it countless times during my delivery runs, sometimes even sleeping in the truck. That stretch near the test range always felt different. The desert has a unique emptiness that's hard to describe. Hours can pass without seeing a single gas station, and the landscape seems to swallow you whole. I was sipping warm water and half listening to a crackling AM radio station when I first saw them. 3 lights hung in the sky, almost straight ahead, about 30 degrees up. They were small, bright white points, clearer than stars. My first thought was aircraft flying in formation, but something felt off. In the days that followed, strange things started happening. My phone began glitching, calls dropped, the screen flickered randomly. My clock radio reset itself multiple times, always around 2 a.m. Even the apartment lights would dim briefly, as if experiencing a quick power fluctuation, though the building's main power never failed. I tried to dismiss these occurrences at first. I'm not easily rattled, but the memory of that light kept nagging at me. Its movement was deliberate, silent. No planes were nearby, no satellites showed up on tracking apps. Just a slow fall, an unsettling hover, then a sudden climb. Maybe I was tired, overworked, imagining things after a long shift. But the moment lingered. Now, during quiet nights, I catch myself looking up, scanning the sky, half expecting to see it again. It hasn't returned. I can't explain what I saw that night. Was it a trick of light, an atmospheric phenomenon, or something else entirely? All I know is that on that dark highway, I witnessed something that moved too purposefully, too silently to be a falling star. It paused long enough for me to truly see it, unlike anything I've ever encountered before. The military installations nearby made strange sightings almost routine, but these were different. 3 white lights hung motionless in the sky, perfectly positioned in a triangle. No wavering, no sound. I killed the radio and cracked the window, straining to hear something, anything. Just tires on asphalt. Their stability was unnerving. Unlike commercial aircraft that drift and wobble, these lights remained rock solid. For 5 solid minutes, they maintained exact formation while I watched, roughly paralleling the road. I slowed down, trying to get a better view. Eventually, I pulled onto the shoulder and cut the engine. Complete silence. Stepping out of the truck, I saw the lights hanging slightly lower. Suddenly, they scattered. Each light darted in a different direction. One left, one up, one straight back, so fast I could barely track their movement. No curves, just instant displacement. Gone. I stood there, stunned. Military test, drones, but I'd never seen anything move like that, especially without a sound. When I turned back toward the truck, they were already back. Same three lights, same triangle formation, exactly where they'd been before. That reappearance unnerved me more than their initial scatter. I hadn't seen them return. They were just there. I climbed into the truck and drove, maintaining a steady pace. No sudden moves. I wanted distance without drawing attention. Mirrors and windshield revealed the lights tracking me, neither closing in nor fading away. Then, like someone flipping a switch, they blinked out. 10 minutes later, strange things started happening. My dash clock flickered and reset to 4:11 a.m., a time that didn't match my watch or phone. The odometer also reset, as if I just started the truck. Not normal, especially mid-drive. Something was definitely off. I roll D into Bay around 1:30, checking into a small motel across from the gas station. The desk clerk gave me a strange look, commenting that I seemed pale. I explained I'd had a long drive. My name's Eric, and I work in software support. Sitting behind a screen all day means I usually need to get outside. This trip was a week-long journey through the Mojave Desert, mostly just me, my old Jeep, and a map. No real plan, just driving through empty places, staying off main highways. On the last night, I was near Baker, California, heading back toward the 15. The sun had already set, leaving a deep blue desert sky at dusk. Heat from the day still lingered close to the ground, and the roads were nearly empty. Just me and my headlights cutting through the darkness. About 40 miles outside Baker, a black sedan appeared behind me. It looked standard, with no logos. In the rearview mirror, I caught a blurry glimpse of the driver, just a vague shape of a man. I thought it might be a coincidence, but an uneasy feeling crept in. I started playing a cat-and-mouse game. Speeding up, slowing down, the car matched my every move perfectly. The more I tried to lose them, the closer they seemed. Eventually, I turned off the highway onto a smaller road leading to a gas station, hoping to understand what was happening. The black sedan stopped about 20 yards behind me, engine idling. I got out and started filling my tank, constantly watching the car. The driver remained motionless, just watching. Something inexplicable kept me from leaving immediately. After filling up, I climbed back into my Jeep, feeling torn. Something held me there, an unexplainable force. Then, slowly and quietly, the passenger window of the black sedan began to roll down, breaking the silent night. In my room later, I sat on the bed with the TV on mute, trying to process everything. I didn't fall asleep until the sky started getting light. Even then, it didn't feel like real sleep. A black car had materialized out of the darkness, its window sliding down to reveal a man. Mid-40s, clean-shaven, dressed in a dark suit and shirt. He fixed me with eyes that were calm yet razor-sharp. No smile, just a low, clear warning. You saw something you shouldn't. I blinked, caught off guard. I don't know what you mean, I stammered. His response was simple. Drive carefully from now on. Then the window rolled up, and the car vanished into the night like smoke. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of the encounter. I hadn't noticed anything unusual during my trip, at least, nothing I'd admit to seeing. But the intensity of his gaze and the weight of his words left no room for doubt about his seriousness. I didn't follow the car or attempt to chase it. Instead, I started my Jeep and drove home, constantly checking my rearview mirror. Was it a warning? A threat? I couldn't be sure. Since that night, I've become hyper-aware of the subtle things, the shadows that move just beyond perception, the distant humming that echoes through the desert darkness. I rarely share this story. Who would believe me? And if they did, their look would change, that knowing, slightly pitying glance. Sometimes late at night, I catch glimpses of distant headlights on the horizon, and I wonder. I apologize, but the text you've provided appears to be an incomplete or fragmented sentence. Could you provide the full text or script that you would like me to rewrite? Without the complete context, I cannot effectively restructure the paragraph while maintaining its original meaning.